Rogers TV, Brampton.
I'll call to order this special council meeting for Thursday, July the 21st. Roll call. All are present except Councillor Gibson, who's absent. Councillor Groves is on vacation. Councillor Yanika, Councillor Jeffrey, and Councillor Miles, and Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Toby. Oh, sorry, John's there. Just walked in. Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none then, approval of the agenda, moved by Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor Kovac, that the agenda for July 21st, 2016 Special Regional Council meeting include an additional communication item from Barry Horosco Planning Law regarding the Bolton Residential Expansion Regional Official Plan Amendment application to be dealt with under items related to Public Works, item 7.3, and further that the agenda for the July 21st, 2016 Special Regional Council meeting include an additional communication item from Robert G. Dumani, Aird and Bearless LLP regarding the proposed Region Appeal Official Plan Amendment Bolton Residential Expansion Study, BREZ, to be dealt with under items related to Public Works, item 7.4, and further that the agenda for the July 21st, 2016 Special Regional Council meeting be approved as amended. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. There are no delegations. So the first item is the items related to enterprise programs and services. Coordinated Plans Review 2016, Preliminary Advocacy Opportunities and Recommendations for Improvement, and it'll be presented by Arvind Prasad, Director of Integrated Planning Division. Welcome, Arvind.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of council, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation on a very important piece of planning legislation, the Coordinated Plans Review. So on June 23rd, council asked staff to examine the Coordinated Plans Review to help council identify opportunities for advocacy at the upcoming August AMO meeting. The presentation today reflects the report before Regional Council, which includes preliminary consultation with local municipal staff. We will be doing further consultation with other stakeholders, including the development industry, in the coming weeks on this. The province has requested comments to be submitted by September the 30th of 2016. The issues, as you are aware, are complex, and they need careful review by staff. We are working towards providing comments to the province in September, reflecting the outcomes of our consultation, including the comments of council contained in this report. In the meantime, staff believe that there are a number of advocacy opportunities. The Coordinated Plans Review include the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Niagara Escarpment Plan, the Oak Ridges Moraine Plan, and the Greenbelt Plan. Together, they manage growth, protect the natural environment, protect agricultural lands in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The Coordinated Plans Review began in early 2015. The region provided initial comments back to the province through a staff report to council, which was endorsed in May of 2015. The province has now issued proposed changes to the 4 plans after considering the input it received. The input included the work of the Crombie panel, which released its report on December 7th of 2015. We are pleased to say that many of the recommendations of Regional Council were addressed by the province. A comprehensive evaluation of the province's responses to our recommendations can be viewed in the accompanying report on today's agenda. Some of them include, they heard council on inclusionary zoning, and that is being addressed separately through Bill 204. They've introduced new policies to allow us to separate low-density employment uses from residential density calculations, which is something council wanted. There is being provided greater consistency in definitions throughout the plans. You'll remember previously the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the Oak Ridges Moraine Plan had different definitions, sometimes which were competing. And diversified uses on farms have been harmonized, for example, across all of the plans. So this is the good news. However, opportunities do exist in specific areas for advocacy on important issues, including at the upcoming AMO conference. So this slide shows you some of the areas where they've actually made some changes which are reflective of council's previous position. So one of the recommendations we have to the council, to the province, is that new intensification and density targets should only apply to the post-2031 period and only at the regional level. The province is proposing that residential intensification be raised to a minimum of 60% of all new residential units. Currently, it is a minimum of 50% by 2026 in the regional official plan, although in the places to grow, it's 40%. So they want to go from 40 in places to grow to 60. Further, the province is proposing that greenfield density targets be now 80 people in jobs per hectare in designated greenfield areas after allowing for exclusion of low-density employment uses. So the current places to grow density requirement is 50 people in jobs per hectare. So they want to go from 50 to 80, the one concession that's been made is low-density employment uses can be taken out in the calculations. You'll recall that low-density employment uses drag down the overall densities and make it very difficult to achieve. To facilitate the proposed requirements, as I mentioned, the province has allowed for exemptions for low-density employment uses in the calculation of density, and they also promised to create a standard methodology to determine land budgets. Several large OMB hearings have been held on land disagreements, specifically around land budgets. Proponents have different ways of calculating land budgets from municipalities and so forth. That's led to OMB hearings. So a consistent methodology for budgeting land for development across the greater Golden Horseshoe is a welcome relief. However, realizing designated greenfield area densities effective from the date of implementation is not possible. And the reason it's not possible is because communities have already been built or serviced or planned to be built at lesser densities and intensification rates. So if the communities have been, if a significant amount of communities across the greater Golden Horseshoe have already been built at lower densities, by including them in the calculation of a much higher density, that would require us to have significantly higher densities in the remaining areas to be built. So we can't unplan what is already in the ground, and that's the point. In fact, suburban residential development is very difficult to further densify. As such, the proposed increase will need significant density and supporting in population at the edge of the designated greenfield areas. So what will happen is you'll have greenfield areas with lower densities, then at the edge of that greenfield area, you'll have much higher densities as a result of the province's proposal. Preliminary calculations suggest that those densities are unachievable. It is likely possible to increase intensification and density in the post-2031 period at the regional level. So if we say to the province that what needs to be done here is take the new growth plan and only apply it to post-2031, if we can do that, then the densities are achievable. But to retroactively apply it to development that's already in the ground is not possible. So in summary, the province needs to put some more thought into their proposed changes to density and intensification. We are working through the numbers, and we'll be sharing our results with the province. What we need is a transitional provision that clearly indicates that the plan changes are effective only for the post-2031 period. And B, support for the work that has already been done across the greater Golden Horseshoe municipalities on compliance with the original 2006 growth plan. Creating complete communities with significant density in intensified areas will not only support investment in infrastructure such as transit, but it'll also conserve our resources and limit our impact on the environment. But density and intensification has to be done right. And we need provincial support to do density right, and we need support to deliver services for the best. The province needs to support infrastructure from day one, such as investing in affordable housing, investing in regional and local transit in both greenfield areas and existing built-up areas, and moving forward with the GTA West environmental assessment in order to be successful in building complete communities at the proposed targets in Peel Region. We know from work that a consulting firm called Risk Analytica has done, which was previously presented to Council, that benefits from infrastructure investments accrue to senior levels of government. Their work shows that for every dollar of municipal revenue derived from growth, the federal revenue increases by $6.22 and provincial revenue by $5.70. Supporting growth is in the best interest of higher orders of government. Furthermore, for every dollar we invest in capital infrastructure, Ontario needs to invest $7.65 and Ottawa $3.16 in order to properly realize our forecasts and appropriately support growth with infrastructure, including transit. The province is proposing that regions identify strategic growth areas and major transit areas to support increased densities. Planning these denser designated greenfield areas, strategic growth areas, and major transit stops requires transit investment and other infrastructure investment in order to create vibrant, complete communities. Because in the end, that's what we're trying to achieve here, creating vibrant, complete communities. But the province needs to take a closer look at how to support the effective implementation of this, and how to support the effective implementation of, for example, community hubs. There are jurisdictional, funding, and administrative considerations to resolve. In terms of community hubs, providing different services by different providers under the same roof can often be very complicated. They need to be at the table with service providers and service managers to work through these types of issues. The next recommendation relates to public health and climate change outcomes. The Region of Peel has done significant work on improving health and climate change outcomes. In fact, both of these are term of council priorities for this council. However, provincial support is needed. The province needs to better emphasize and support healthy design and climate change in their plans reviews. Increased density and intensification, if it's done right, can contribute to overall positive health and climate change outcomes. The province can do this by connecting intensification and density targets to measurable health and climate outcomes. The province can further link health indicators and targets to measure the completeness of communities in order to compare health statuses in more complete communities to less complete communities. These indicators can include diabetes, prevalence of overweight, and obesity. Residents in newly built communities and existing communities should have the ability to work and play and be healthy without an overdependence on the automobile. The region's work on healthy development could serve as an excellent resource and starting point for the province to further take this work to a new level. Further, the province is making significant shifts, including investments to tackle climate change. However, many impacts, such as flooding and property damage, are felt locally. They're felt here. For example, municipalities are left to deal with the consequences of severe weather events. Municipalities need provincial financial support to seriously adapt to the impacts of climate change. Another advocacy opportunity is around integrating growth management strategies and support for the province. So as directed by Council, Peel is on our way to a new approach to growth, including financing, infrastructure, and planning. A lot of effort has been expended to integrate various approaches, enhance relationships, and we plan to report to Council on a proposed growth management program in 2017. The province is proposing guidance on creating land budget methodologies and creating watershed, asset management, climate change requirements for infrastructure planning. While we and other municipalities across the Greater Golden Horseshoe welcome the clarity that the province will provide to steer our growth management work, the province needs to support our program, which we've invested considerably in, instead of reinventing municipal efforts. Guidance on land budgeting is essential for success, provided that existing municipal efforts are respected. Also, the province needs to help us incorporate new climate change, watershed, and asset management requirements into existing approaches and processes for managing growth. For instance, requirements for watershed-based planning for infrastructure could become unnecessarily onerous from both a time and cost perspective without carefully considered guidelines from the province and associated financial support. Another advocacy opportunity is around the GTA West Corridor EA and the region's participation in that. Regional staff suggests that the EA for the GTA West Corridor be completed as soon as possible with a commitment to implement the EA recommendations by the province. In order to undertake effective regional planning, certainty is required about infrastructure decisions such as the GTA West Corridor. In the interim, lands are essentially frozen. Our ability to meet transportation demands and our forecasts, our ability to protect employment lands, all of that is hindered by the uncertainty that the province has put on us. 40% of Peel's gross domestic product is related in some capacity to goods movement. Lack of clarity around the GTA West Corridor is likely to have an economic impact on our communities. We know that the province is stuck an advisory panel that will report back in April 2017. The terms of reference are currently being crafted. The GTA West affects us directly, and we should be at that table, at that advisory panel. Another advocacy opportunity is around identifying provincial responsibilities in natural heritage and agriculture mapping. Staff are supportive of harmonization in the plans, particularly policies providing flexibility and permissions for agriculture-related and on-farm diversified uses. The policies propose that the province will lead mapping of natural heritage systems, and this is outside the Greenbelt, and prime agricultural areas. These changes would infringe in areas that are traditionally municipal responsibilities and create a one-size-fits-all approach that may not be sensitive to municipal refinement and knowledge. Staff recommend that province not lead the mapping and instead provide guidance to municipalities and capitalize on the excellent work that municipalities have done in this area. And finally, this is my last one, a better alignment of provincial policy guidance and funding to support climate change. A major theme in the 4 plans is climate change. As we all know, Peel and other communities in Ontario are experiencing extreme weather events such as the July 2013 storm that impacted Mississauga and Brampton and the December 2013 ice storm. Broadly, the plans work together to address climate change from both a mitigation and adaptation perspective by promoting complete compact communities, integrating transportation and land use, protecting natural heritage, water and agricultural systems, and promoting a culture of conservation. The changes are consistent with the Ontario Climate Change Strategy and Peel's own climate change strategy. What is needed, however, is that the province support municipal roles, responsibilities, and needs beyond land use planning and provide guidance, programs, and funding support in areas of municipal responsibility for both mitigation. So mitigation might be, for example, retrofitting municipal building stock, and adaptation, flooding, dealing with flooding, infrastructure, stormwater, and housing. Further, the province should develop policies to govern all emissions, such as particulates, sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, to better address health and environmental outcomes. The province has listened to our concerns in summary, and they have addressed areas where we had wanted to see progressive change. However, more work is needed in specific areas, such as dealing with the density and intensification and the interplay between density and intensification. More work is required in the investment of infrastructure and also in dealing in areas such as climate change. In terms of next steps, we will continue to meet with stakeholders over the coming weeks, including the development industry, and we will write a response based on the report on today's agenda, detailing our comments to the province by the September 30th commenting deadline. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Arvin. Mayor Thompson.
Arvin, first of all, I got to say thank you for putting together a really good report in the short timeline that we asked you for, to you and your staff. Thank you. We really appreciate it. And I do know you had Mark Head come out and meet with the farm community as well for your second last recommendation, and thank you for that. Having said that, I got to tell you very eloquently, our regional chair did make a comment to the province saying, you know, you put a pause on the G2S corridor which has frozen a lot of our land. But now maybe we should be putting a pause on this to really understand it. To me, I think this is the most serious thing as decisions that we're going to be making as council in this term is what is being issued here. I think there's a lot of good stuff that's been brought forward through the four-plan review, but I think some of it is premature. And this is where I'm coming from. I think the province is throwing a lot of stuff out there. Your recommendations coming back is we need shared costs, we need shared understanding. So my question is should we be sending a recommendation from here to ask for a pause because we need to know what the costs are or a guesstimate so that we can say back to the province, okay, if you want this, this is what's expected from you as the partner because you've dictated this policy, or on how to change things. And there's some of the challenges we have. It's a knee-jerk reaction to come to the 80, especially in the greenfield development, because over the last 10 years, a lot of the development's already pre-approved plans. I don't know where Brampton is, so I can't speak on behalf of Michael and John here, but I will tell you, Mayfield West is the one with the latest plans. We built at 65 and 67 because to make up for the employment shortfalls, this is what we've had to intensify. Well, we got problems. One is parking's an issue, especially if people want to come and see family on a weekend. The other challenge that we're having to deal with is lack of park space because there just isn't the backyards. Also, it's change of lifestyle. As I talked to Councillor Downey last night, in one community, maybe it was acceptable when you had 40 people per hectare, but now when you got 65 people per hectare, that same lifestyle just does not fit in that community anymore. And there's no bylaws to fix that. So we have some challenges going forward, and I don't think we've really learned to understand this is the challenge that we're having at 65 and 67 people per hectare. Tell me how we're going to make that work for 80. And Mayor McCallion also made a comment that, a lot of people come here wanting to own a home. When you start to intensify like that, you're taking away that opportunity. And the people that can afford to live in a detached home, detached homes will not fit in greenfield development at 80 people per hectare. No one's going to come to the outer fringes to live in a high-rise. That's for the downtown core. If Mississauga needs to intensify, that's where the market's got to be to make the LRT work. It doesn't fit in greenfield. And the Mayor of Markham articulates that extremely well. We have to find what areas. It's not one size fits all. We have to find what fits with the community within. Because I'm going to tell you, we've already seen with the Greenbelt, we've got leapfrogging happening. Our last road study that we did in Caledon is 74% of our roads in 2011 is commuter traffic coming to Mississauga and Brampton and Toronto to go to work. And it's going to increase that much further because people are going to move to the fringe areas and travel south. And this is the challenge we've done is I don't really think there is a market, especially in greenfield development that we're developing with. And this is a really big challenge. I can't speak for Brampton. They've got their own issues. We've got our own to deal with in Caledon. But I think this is very concerning that I agree with the regional chair. I think we need to ask a pause, but I think we have to say we are asking for a pause, and here's why. We need to understand what the costs are of intensification, especially is at 80, how do you do stormwater plans unless you use everybody's basement as a holding zone? But we can laugh about it, but it's reality. I think we have to rethink on how we do planning and development, just to throw that number out and implement it and said, here you go. And the other thing I think, Arvin, I would like to have your opinion on this is they're talking about implementing, I am almost saying that for the 80 people per hectare has to be a phased-in approach because I think we need time to figure out how these communities can work and think. Well, maybe ask your opinion on it, but I got to say thank you. I thought you've really nailed these very, very well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some responses here. First of all, the greenfield densities of the past and the way we've built communities at lower densities, in my opinion, no longer work. So I think that's the starting point. Suburban sprawl in itself is not financially feasible. However, I understand your point, Mr. Mayor, because complete communities do have to come in at higher densities, but they have to work. A community has to work. And that is one of the issues that we have with this is we show that around the 60 range and some of the communities that have been built in greenfield communities, they do work, but we have not built greenfield communities at 80.
No.
And that is a very high density for these communities. So what we're suggesting here is that that the new, in essence, it is a bit of a pause because if this plan was to be approved today the way it is, it will retroactively apply to development anything that's greenfield. And it would allow that the existing greenfield densities, which are lower, to stay, but new development would have to compensate and be built at very high densities. So what we're suggesting at this is that these new requirements only apply to the post-2031 period. So that way, it's the new development that comes in after 2031 that this would apply to. And that's because there have been a significant amount of planning effort on the existing places to grow. The 2006 places to grow proposed by the province, we met all those requirements. Many municipalities went to their intermunicipal board and expended a lot of resources. The time is not now to open all of that up again. The time is to get on with it, get on with the development that our municipalities need. So that's why we're suggesting in response to you that this apply only to the post-2031 period, first of all, and we do have concerns with the 80 number because we don't have the experience here in Peel that would work.
Just if I could have one more quick question back to Arvin, Mr. Chairman, this is where I'm asking is I think we almost need to have a pause, as the regional chair did suggest, and the reason for that is here's how and why, and I think there's a lot of costs that we're going to endure if we don't have provincial engagement, and I really think we need some time to really hammer down to figure out how this is going to impact all of us.
Thank you. Actually, it was quite timely that we had the Premier Summit last Thursday. And I did, on behalf of Peel, indicate that I felt that there should be a pause, not only to give us and other municipalities an opportunity to review the changes that are being proposed, but also, and you've clearly indicated it as well, Arvin, the fact that we haven't seen the impacts, in my opinion, of the 2006 growth plan. And we in Peel certainly have complied with not only the 2006 growth plan legislation, but also the intensification policies as well. But we really haven't seen the impact of that. I can cite Mississauga as an example where they carefully looked at and actually proposed densities even higher than what was proposed within the growth plan, but we really haven't seen the impact of the full growth of that. We haven't seen the impact of the LRT. There's so many variables that we, collectively haven't seen. And I can also say that those around the table that represented the GTA and beyond were all in concurrence that they felt that there should be a pause with respect to these proposed changes. So I thank you for raising that, Mayor Thompson. Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Arvin, for your presentation, and thank you to you and your team for such a quick turnaround time. And I think that the comments are great, and they're going to give us a good sounding board as we head to AMO to have those discussions with the province. So thank you very much for that. You clearly listened to the discussion that we've had around this table, especially at the growth management, with regards to those concerns. And thank you for staff to going out to meet with the PFA. I appreciate that as well. The one question that I did have was, is there an opportunity, especially with the climate change information, for staff to sit down with the reps from this table on the Conservation Authority so that we can be carrying the same message to those boards as we're carrying at the region of Peel? Because I think that would be beneficial, and it's another opportunity for the province to hear the region's concerns through those organizations.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. I will not be preparing our staff response until September, because we are going to be meeting with the building industry also and others. So yes, definite opportunity. We could set something up.
Okay. And just to follow up on Mayor Thompson, I think that maybe it might be beneficial for this council to move a motion requesting the province to extend the timelines for commenting so that we have a formal request in. I appreciate the chair making that request, but if we have a formal request in, then we can expect a formal response from the province. So I'd be happy to move that motion.
I can call the vote on that. It was moved by Councillor and second by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sprovieri.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Marvin, for the presentation. Would you happen to know what Brampton's and Mississauga's numbers are today, as we're built, as of today, the job and people per hectare?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't have those information before me right now, but we can get that to you. We do have targets in our official plan for designated greenfield area densities, if that's what you're talking about. And for Brampton, that is 52 people in jobs per hectare.
I understand.
And I believe for Mississauga, it's 71, 72.
Okay, and the number that the province is projecting, the 80, that they're now the revised numbers. Is there a balance between employment and residential? Or could it be 80 residential people per hectare at the end of the day if places like Bolton or Caledon doesn't achieve any substantial employment growth?
That's through you, Mr. Chairman. That's a good question. I'll explain. The 80 people in jobs per hectare is actually calculated across the region. So it's not one municipality that has to meet that. It's not one development. It's across the region. So that's got to average in at 80, and it's people in jobs per hectare, but they've excluded some of the lower density employment uses, warehousing, logistics, freight, that type of uses can be excluded from that calculation. So really it would be population and employment jobs which serve that population as opposed to industry in the calculation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that. Yes, sir. And through the chair, the other question I have is the province in this next set of legislation, are they addressing the issue where people are actually, in order to get an affordable detached home or a low-density home, they're actually going north of Highway 89 and places like Bradford, going up by sea. Dundalk is advertising low-density, single detached homes under 200,000 and up price range. And lately I've been going up Highway 10 in the morning, some mornings, and I see the traffic coming down from north of 89. It's just unbelievable because people are to buy what they want. They're traveling an hour and a half, and some people are going as far as Wasaga Beach to get the house that they're looking for. So as a province, do anything to sort of try to curtail that sort of movement of people that's putting all this pressure on the environment and also on the infrastructure? Are they addressing that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the province has specific targets for growth for the outer ring municipalities, which is what you're talking about, the municipalities around 89 and north of there. And you are seeing what appears to be significant development, but in the context of what's happening in the Greater Toronto Area and Greater Golden Horseshoe, it's really quite small. But however, that is a concern, and the concern is of leapfrogging of development, and leapfrogging of development is never a good thing because there's a greater environmental impact of that type of development, and it doesn't factor in the full cost to society, including the cost of automobile ownership and so forth. So yeah, you're seeing the cheap housing, but you're paying a lot more in other areas.
Of course, and that's well, when the people balance it out, they probably make it work, and because they're getting the type of lifestyle they want, and people want to, as we know, most people want to have their their space, and and that's what their families are looking for. So it's going to be hard to try to convince people to move into an apartment or a condominium when they have options to go north and get what they want, even if they have to travel a longer distance. So unless the province addresses that somehow to restrict that from happening and force people to have more of a European type of lifestyle than that they're used to, then it's going to be hard to achieve that. So I think this is some of the things that has to be addressed by the province along the way. Otherwise, people will do what they have to do in order to get what they want. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Yanika.
Thank you. Well, what a marvelous conversation. I think I'm going to start. Some may have forgotten. We would not be here, not but for my colleague to my left, that during the growth management in May and June said, this is an important issue. We'd better come back for it. And from not being able to host the meeting to see all my colleagues back, and some canceled their transportation plans, holiday plans, I think it's a real testament to all of us. The press won't write about it, but well done all around. That having been said, sure, a pause. You know where the pause better start, though? Better start with the OMB. Are you going to pause the OMB as part of the pause? Say, don't worry, nothing else is going to proceed, and we're just going to, and don't worry, you won't get more developments along your LRT corridor. I don't think so. So the game goes on. Do you know, what a marvelous conversation. Looking at it, the concern that I have, and Arvin used the word, and I understand it completely, with regards to affected lands and lands that we might have to freeze, or the word you used was frozen. We can't wait for the province and the federal government to catch up. They never have. In the decade that I was born, and during my teens, and I'm in my 50s now, every government, and it's been all stripes of government, have announced, and you'll all know it, a national transportation policy, a national housing policy, a national daycare policy. I'm waiting for any one of them. It's only been 50 years, but I'm sure we'll get there. Have you ever heard of it, you know, the Windsor to Quebec City line? I've heard it 10,000 times. Does it make as much sense as rain? Yeah, I guess we'll get to it someday. Hope my grandchildren see it. You see the point I'm coming to. If we had to wait for the province to deal with the growth that we've had to deal with, we built all of the city of Mississauga before anybody knew what the 403 was. The city center secondary plan was approved in 1987. Nobody knew what the 403 was. Nobody knew what the 407 was. And had we had to wait for them, where would you be? Look at the history in Toronto. During the same time, what did they do? Well, that's the wrong question. It's what didn't they do? They didn't build Spadina, and their subway system looks like it did when I went to Ryerson as a teenager. They've added virtually nothing. Did they freeze development 30 years ago? No, they've doubled their city because the city had to get on with it. So a discussion, I guess, for the next topic, but when it comes to where we're at, with respect to the mayor of Caledon, yeah, freeze and build it along the corridor. What my people are telling you is we've got enough. We've got plenty. We don't want more. Get on with it the way we're getting on with it. My old, and I know you know that, Alan, my old refrain, I'm owed 111 acres of parkland. There is no parkland. You got to buy gas stations and tear them down, and land is now selling for $4 to $5 million an acre along the corridor. $500 million. So we're all under the same pressures as it comes, as it relates to this. And Arvin and I disagree in terms of freezing. You can't wait for the province to catch up. They never will. They never have. And in other instances, when we've dealt with, I think we've done the right thing. I think all you can do is protect the corridors, like we did with Mayfield West, by the way. So where exactly will it be here? I, for one, don't think the GTA West corridor will ever be built. But who knows? Who knows? The Greater Toronto Area needs a second airport. Is it Pickering? Maybe, maybe not. You want to freeze everything north of the 407 to wait and see what happens? If you freeze the OMB, I'm in. But you're not gonna. So here we go. So we're left with looking after it at our level, doing the best that we can, which we have, deal with the planning, bring the proper policies in, and coming back to the GTA West corridor, I think Caledon's told us where it should go. Great, stick that in. If the minister's not going to do it, we'll do it. And we get on with our lives like you did with Mayfield, like I did with the downtown of Mississauga. Because Plan B is not, boy, we'd love Plan B if we could, just freeze everything. Well, I'll get reelected for life. It works for us if you abolish the OMB. It's not going to stop. They'll keep coming. So we'd better deal with it as pragmatically as we can, because it's not going to stop. Last point I make, and Alan, I think he's got such a fundamental point. We also talk about employment. I, for one, do not know, discussion for later on, what the nature of employment lands are going to be. I just don't know. You know, one of the greatest phenomenons of the last month, this Pokemon Go. Can somebody tell me where the head office is, where the warehouse is? I don't know. But it's a phenomenon that's added billions of dollars to a stock. And I can say it now because I heard of a story that you may have heard about since, where a very smart investor approached an investment institution downtown Toronto and said, I have an idea. All this talk about Uber, they're not insured. I've created the app. Get your Uber and have the Uber driver push this button, and for 4 or 6 or 8 cents, just add it, and that constitutes the insurance. Asked the investment institution for $10 million, they gave them 20. And you're going to see an IPO pretty soon, and they want to go to the market for $1 billion. Wish I'd have thought of it. Where's the factory? Where's the office? The guy did it out of his basement in his home. That's the new economy. So we're going to wait to figure all that out? We haven't before, and you can't. You make the best decisions you can going forward. But my final point, thank you for bringing, if we had to rely on the province or the federal, remember, they don't plan, they crisis manage. Is it an election year? Where's the photo op? Here's your money for an LRT. That's all they've ever done. Are the bridges falling in Montreal? Here's $5 billion. Let's fix the bridge. I don't make those examples up. You all know them to be true. That's the most consistent funding. Been waiting 50 years. So it is what it is, and we have to deal with it, and we've coped with it fairly well. I don't think we have any choice but to continue on that way. But marvelous report, marvelous discussion, the life of the local and the regional councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. You know, when the coordinated review was first announced, we were pretty excited and thought we had already complied with many of the recommendations. But now there are all these unintended consequences that we realize only after we analyze the recommendations further. So I'm glad we're going to hit the pause button and ask for more time for consideration. This was a sentiment that was pretty unanimous among the mayors and chairs at the meeting with the Premier that Chair Dale and Mayor Thompson, Mayor Jeffrey and I attended. So hopefully the province will listen and give us more time and listen to our feedback and make the necessary amendments. So I was delighted to support Councillor Innes's motion, and hopefully they will listen to us and delay the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I rescheduled my holidays. My son's not very happy, but we are still going. Arvin, when we first had Places to Grow, the first Places to Grow plan that came out, we did delay. I think we were like 6 months delayed in our response. Am I correct? Do you recall? I don't think we met the timelines that we were supposed to have it submitted by because, again, it was brand new. There were things in there that we didn't understand. So you don't have to answer if you don't remember. But I do support putting this on hold. The one that I have concern with, Arvin, is with the employment lands, and I read on page 6. So if I'm reading this correctly, they're encouraging more. Manufacturing, warehousing, and logistics. Is that how am I interpreting it correctly?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman. Under prime employment areas, to the council?
So it's 5.1-6, yep, under prime employment areas.
Yes. So what they're not, it's not necessarily that they're encouraging it. What they're saying is that the calculation of density should not be impeded by lower density employment uses. So if you're going to calculate density, this is something council has said actually, there's some of the densities that for warehousing, logistics has come in so incredibly low that we're trying to achieve 50, but it drags us down because the densities for employment is low. So they're recognizing that fact and saying that municipalities can plan those areas separately from the calculation of density. We'll have to do further work on that and try to understand where those lands are in Peel and what the policy environment could look like for prime employment areas.
Yeah, and I look forward to the further work because I do have concerns on that. The other thing, Arvin, is I agree with Councillor Ainika the conversation about freezing lands, we can't afford to do it. It's economically, it's just a disaster for us economically, and I think the province needs to understand that we've been frozen long enough, I think, with the GTA West Corridor, and we can't keep going with that. And I recall having a conversation many, many years ago when they first introduced the GTA West Corridor in looking at doing this. Jin Wang, I think, was the manager of the project at the time, and the concern I had at that time was, do we stop our planning? Do we just stop everything because you have to figure out, they didn't even have a study area at the time, it was brand new. I said, do we stop everything and wait for you? Well, his response was, no, you just keep planning ahead, and I think that we need to send that message and make it extremely clear to the province that we can't just stop while you figure out what you need to figure out, because we have a debt load that we are carrying here at the region, and the municipalities all across Ontario, I'm sure, are in some financial crunch, and we can't afford to just stop everything while you figure out your stuff. So I hope that that message will be articulated, probably not the way I've said it, but articulated better than what I've said, and certainly get that message across. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tovey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for the report, Arvin. It's insightful as usual and very well articulated in your presentation, so I do appreciate it. Just a couple of very quick questions. I assume you've been communicating back and forth with Dave and Lowell, our government relations people, on sort of what our advocacy opportunities will be, because AMO's coming up pretty soon.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, the presentation and its recommendations, I believe there's 6 of them here, are what we suggest are advocacy opportunities. So they would be there should be some advocacy around the fact that the intensification and density targets really don't work in the current planning period. So we need to we have to think about its application for post-2031. Let the development that's been approved or in process for the 2031 planning period move forward. Some advocacy around provincial investment, especially in critical areas like affordable housing and infrastructure, community hubs, and so forth, transit. Some advocacy around public health and climate change, 2 major issues which are term of council priorities for this council. Advocacy around integrating growth management strategies, like we've done a lot of work in Peel on growth management. Let's not reinvent it at the provincial level, instead support it. And then this is the one that's been some discussion around the table, specific advocacy around the GTA West Corridor, that the EA must be completed. It cannot be put on hold because it does essentially freeze development and not allow development to go forward, and that's not what we want. And some advocacy around the fact that natural heritage and agricultural mapping, province wants to take that over. That should be done at the municipal level. And finally, better alignment of provincial policy with climate change and supporting some of the work around climate change.
Right, and I noticed Dave and Lowell aren't in the audience today, but the question really was, you've been communicating this with Dave and Lowell, I guess, our government relations people, of course.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and I guess my last question would be, you do articulate this extremely well. Are you planning on coming to AMO when we meet Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing? It may be helpful for our committee to have your wisdom with us.
It's something I can discuss with my CAO afterwards.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Would you like me to talk to him? Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to add in, Arvin spoke to the advocacy positions about the content of the consultation. We now have a motion just passed today from councils for us to advocate to delay the to extend the consultation period. So I think that's really important that we add that in as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to quickly address the health issues. I think the intensification targets is going to have unintended consequences, and I'm not sure if the government has actually investigated those consequences well enough. Coming back from an international conference on sustainability, I was lucky to hear Dr. Mowat speak and a number of other health officials around the world. And we talk about urban sprawl, but what was on the agenda there was vertical sprawl. And they're actually saying that vertical sprawl is worse than urban sprawl due to the health and social issues that it causes. So I would love to see more investigation into the health and social costs, knowing we're the region appeal, and that will end up on our shoulders. So what they told me about was how when we build apartment buildings, the land becomes more expensive because from a developer position, that's a good moneymaker going up. But the people get detached. They don't travel outside of their apartments. So tremendous health issues arising from that situation. So for Councillor Anika, I totally get his concern about the vertical. So I think we need to, from a health perspective, take a better look at that type of consequences. We keep focusing on the land and moving out, but I think we've also forgotten about what happens when we go up. So if we could delve into that a little bit more, I think that would be important. Thank you. I just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Chairman, we are looking at the air quality impacts associated with greenfield and intensified areas, and we will be reporting to council in the future on that.
Thank you. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Arvin, for the report. I did want to say that I agree with Mayor Thompson. Our issues are very similar, and I do agree with what you were saying, and Councillor Anika, who's no longer sitting around the table. The question that I have is, we're going to ask the province to put a pause on this. What's the likelihood that they actually listen and put the pause on this? Anybody? Nobody?
Can never predict what the province is going to do.
No. So, if there's, taking a step back, and earlier your comments were this will be all post 2031, is there an opportunity for us to reopen the 2031 numbers, play around and change it a bit, knowing that this is going to be coming forward?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's not the advice that I would give you, only because there's been so much work to get to the 2031 numbers. As you know, ROPA 24 was appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board. A settlement was reached on that. It would open up all of that again, and it's probably not what you want to do, especially when you have 2031B numbers at your disposal, and we need to deal with that. And as I indicated to council a couple of weeks ago, we will be bringing that forward.
So 2031B numbers is where we would find an opportunity to play around and mesh the two together.
Yeah, that is your next opportunity, 2031B numbers, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I guess
Actually, Councillor Palashi, David would just like to make a comment on that.
Just for council's information, we are planning to bring recommendations on the 2031B and 2041 numbers together within 6 months, within the spring of 2017, just to give you a time frame on that.
Sure. Okay. So that gives us an opportunity then to make any changes necessary. I fully support the pause. Like I said, I'm a little bit unsure of, and it's been talked about, the financial aspect of everything and where the province comes into play with helping out with the healthy communities. I don't know if their track record is stellar as of right now. You look at Brampton and the fact that we have one of the busiest emergency hospitals in Canada, and the fact that Brampton shouldn't have one of the busiest emergency hospitals in Canada, you would think that Toronto would need that, so, or should have that. So with the pause of this and the financial aspects, I really need to know, where's the province going to come in to the effect of how much money we're going to be able to work out with finding healthy communities. Also, I don't see anywhere in here where this references infill sites. And if infill sites aren't in 2031, then where do we see infill sites in terms of the flow of subdivisions that we've built to date, and them in future being a higher density?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, the province's definition of intensification is very broad, that it includes infill sites, and basically anything that would be within the built boundary. And the built boundary is basically everything that was on the ground and when the Places to Grow came into play. It's about 2006. So anything within the municipalities, it's pretty much all of Mississauga except for Churchill Meadows back then. And in Brampton, not including Northwest Brampton, but parts of East Brampton would be in. So any development in those areas, of the urban areas, would be considered intensification, whether it's in the form of an infill development of one single-family residential or an apartment building. It's considered as part of the intensification, and it counts towards intensification targets and so forth.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much. Just listening to the conversation, and I have to agree with the logic of Councillor Unica. I don't think a pause is really going to do too much for us. I would prefer to see the region using all of its resources and influence to bring forward the great work that staff have already done on the recommendations to ensure that they are incorporated into, hopefully, some of the changes that the province will adopt. Again, it's asking for a pause might leave the provincial government with the impression that we're not ready to respond to the policy changes, rather than there's always more work to be done. So I think we should give some consideration to what a pause will actually mean, and I would rather see us come out strong in regards to the recommendations that we have in front of us. So I don't know if there's room for discussion on the pause. I certainly support the staff recommendations and the work that they've done.
Are you looking for a response?
From somebody.
It's tough around here.
Well, no, I think
Usually there's lots to be said around here.
Actually, what you're saying, Councillor Miles, is one of the reasons we want the pause. We want to make sure we do it right, that we have time to review the changes that are being proposed, because as what was indicated by our own staff today, there's a lot of implications to the what's being asked for by the municipalities, and we don't stand alone. I can tell you, we were represented by right across the GTA and beyond, and they were all of the same frame of mind, that they felt that the importance of this issue, that it required more time to delve into it, and then collectively make our voices heard at the provincial level. But it's not. The pause isn't to delay things. The pause is to make sure that we have more time to implement or to look at what's being proposed for the municipalities. And as like I said, the staff have indicated, and so is staff across the GTA, that it's going to have some real impact on growth.
So, Chair Dale, in regards to that, perhaps it's the language that we need to ensure is correct. Because when you say to me pause, I get the impression of stop. don't do anything, and move forward, where I think we have some pretty sound recommendations that we would like to bring forward to the province of Ontario, and there's no reason why we couldn't be strongly advocating in that area with a request for additional time to work through some of the things that we need.
Councillor Moss, I think that's what we wanted. I think you're quite correct. We're just asking for an extension in time. I use the frame pause because the Minister of Transportation used that to us on the GTA West Corridor when the mayors and I met with him, and he was present at the meeting. So I just said, to quote one of the ministers with respect to the legislation as it applies to the GTA West Corridor, I think the same word should apply to this. So I used the word pause, but basically you're right. We're asking, so we can rephrase it that we're looking for an extension of time, and that's what the other municipalities are looking for as well.
I'd be interested in seeing the motion.
We can, change the wording or do some wordsmithing, but the motion's been passed. I think and the extension of time, we didn't use the word pause in the motion, so. Yeah, extend the time.
They vote on the motion.
When Councillor Innes put it forward.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
David?
Just to clarify, the motion that was carried was to have, to ask the province to extend the consultation period. We didn't give them a date as to extend it until when, we just said to extend it.
Are the recommendations that we have before us, however, going to go forward?
I'm going to present them for a vote.
Okay, so even though we're asking for more time, we are still putting on the floor and sending on our recommendations from today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
David?
The intent of this report, as Arvin said at the beginning, was to have council's support for a series of recommendations, advocacy positions to take to the minister when we meet with the minister at AMO. And staff will be bringing back a final report in September to meet the September 30th deadline for council to vote on with more detail related to these significant policy changes. And my understanding of the motion that was put forward and supported by council was to ask for an extension of that September 30th date.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. I thought maybe I thought I was paying attention when we voted on Councillor Innes's motion to ask for the extension. But what we haven't done is, and maybe the motion needs to be enhanced, to say that we solicit the support of AMO and other municipalities. If the region of Peel feel that we need more time in order to make a relevant and fulsome submission, then I'm sure that other municipalities, and you've indicated that they are, Chair Dale, are in the same position, and smaller municipalities in particular. So I think that the motion to ask for the extension needs to go to AMO, to ask for other municipalities to support or to pass similar motions and to make that request of the province so that they get a sense that this is really something that's important to all of us, then that we need time to make those thoughtful submissions so that we don't end up having to revisit and, quite frankly, gripe about some changes that we didn't have the time or felt that we didn't have the time to respond to adequately.
No, that's a good suggestion. We'll take that as direction to give it in. Thank you for that. So the motion that's in the report, taken as read, moved by Councillor Innes, second by Mayor Thompson. All those in favor then? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Okay, our next item is related to Public Works, response to request for supplemental information, Bolton residential expansion. Adrian Smith and Bruce Taylor will be presenting. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of Council. As you know, I'm Adrian Smith, Manager of Policy Development with Integrated Planning Division, and here with Mr. Taylor on behalf of Finance to present material to you today that's been prepared by staff in response to direction from Regional Council to bring information to this special council meeting that's supplemental to the July 7th report regarding the Bolton residential expansion and the draft ROPA associated with that. As you'll see as I go through this information and material, staff continue to recommend that the hybrid 4-5 option included in the draft ROPA attached to the July 7th report, that be brought forward for the process of a statutory public meeting. And we'll go through some of that. In this presentation, I'll start by providing some background and planning context. Mr. Taylor will provide information on financing matters, including the specific material that was requested by Council through resolution that directed staff to provide supplementary financial analysis of all option areas, including some specific hybrid options. It was hybrid 3-4, 4-5, and 5-6. And we'll finish up, we'll complete the presentation with an overview of next steps, which lead to an open house planned in Caledon for September 14th, a statutory public meeting planned for September 29th, and a final recommendation to Council on the ROPA, which we're targeting for December this year. So starting with some planning context and background. The growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe was released by the province, as we've discussed already today, back in 2006, and that provided population and employment targets for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, including Peel, to the year 2031, and provided an overarching framework for municipalities to plan and manage growth. And as Council has just been discussing, we know that Places to Grow is being revised, and it'll provide a new framework for managing growth to the year 2041, 25 years from now. As recognized by Peel and Caledon through ROPA 24 and Caledon OPA 226, Bolton's well situated to accommodate growth. As development within the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Greater Toronto Area, the mega region, has proceeded through many decades, we've seen significant growth in jobs and population aligned with major transportation infrastructure investment, starting back with the QEW, 401, 403, more recently 407, 410 extensions. We've got Highway 427, and of course, the GO Rail transit network. In Peel, we've seen that growth pattern outward from Toronto into Mississauga and now Brampton. Bolton, located on the eastern edge of Peel, will continue to attract significant growth over the long term. That's well beyond the 2031 planning horizon that we have today. In addition to job growth in Bolton itself, there's proximity which is steadily increasing to jobs that we know are arriving in Brampton, Vaughan, Mississauga, and planning continues for transportation improvements with the 427 extension, GTA West corridor, and eventually improved transit and perhaps even the GO Rail transit in Bolton itself. Bolton, along with Georgetown, remains one of the few larger communities in the GTA without a local transit system even. Nevertheless, it's well situated, as we've described, for significant population and employment growth. A key foundation for the draft ROPA that was recommended by staff and brought forward earlier this month for public consultation is a broader rural service study area, similar to the existing Mayfield West study area boundary in the regional official plan. That's to recognize the consideration for potential further expansion of the Bolton rural service area. On this map here, on the slides, it's shown in red and would be defined by the natural system to the west and to the north, and the southern boundary with Brampton. We know that growth, properly managed, will be a key element to advancing opportunities for local and regional transit in Bolton, and even keeping existing services and businesses viable and functioning as components of a complete community. Even with increased planning controls that we've talked about already today on things like greenfield development due to important considerations like reducing sprawl and climate change, it's recognized that over time, all 6 option areas, the rounding out areas that have been identified, the triangle lands, would eventually be considered at least as potential opportunities for inclusion within the Bolton Rural Service Centre for residential and employment growth. This current planning process that we're engaged in at this time is to consider an expansion to the Bolton Rural Service Centre, the boundary that's in the regional official plan. And as we know, it's constrained by the growth plan, the regional policies, all of which we're planning for the 2031A Peel overall population and employment forecast. And it's constrained, as we've discussed, by things like the density targets, intensification targets that are in that growth plan. And as a result, the remaining allocation that we're planning for in this particular exercise is for to allocate approximately 10,300 people, 2,500 jobs on about 185 hectares of developable land. As directed by regional council in the planning process, which flowed from the ROPA 28 facilitation, we've been undertaking an open and transparent process, and that's been followed in accordance with the timelines that were set out. The region's planning consultant, the Planning Partnership, has carried out a thorough review of all the available information, including the information from the town's process, legislation, the policy framework, the additional technical material, and the stakeholder comments that were received. And based on this, the consultant has identified option 3 and option 4 to be potentially, or to be appropriate and supportable for expansions to Bolton. Throughout the process, we've received numerous comments from the public, and we're continuing to receive more comments over the last week or so. And the expectation is that we'll receive more comments over the summer and into the statutory public meeting and even beyond. And in particular, over the last few weeks, we've received detailed submissions, for example, from Solmar Development Corporation, Bolton Option 3 Landowners Group, North Hill Landowners Group, Gold Humber Station Inc., and even a private landowner in Area 5 that has offered lands for the hospital. And some of those comments are in your agenda today. Some were submitted directly through our process and are on our website, or will be shortly. Planning staff has considered the work of the region's consultants, along with stakeholder comments and all the key regional interests that were identified in the criteria, and have put a special emphasis on promoting fiscal responsibility and response to long-term urban structure. And on this basis, we've recommended that a statutory public meeting proceed on the draft ROPA reflecting the hybrid 4-5 option. This draft ROPA, as I mentioned, was included in Appendix 3 to the July staff report and included a number of schedules and amendments. And you'll see in the financial information that's presented in more detail today that the hybrid 4-5 option is not the lowest cost option. However, by eliminating the need to service water pressure zone 7, shown on the map here, this option is seen as best balancing criteria and reflecting provincial policies around the efficient use of existing infrastructure and avoiding unjustified infrastructure expansions. And it's significantly lower than either option 3 or 4 on their own that were identified as appropriate by the consultant. Although this option recommended for the public meeting does extend south of option 4 and into option 5, it does retain flexibility for considering protection of strategically important employment lands adjacent to the GTA West corridor, and further that an option proceeds to the south, then the less flexibility exists for protecting potentially strategic employment lands. At this point in the process, the development of criteria, analysis, consideration of stakeholder comments, and preparation of a draft ROPA for a statutory public meeting has proceeded on the basis of that process outlined in the facilitation. And as recommended by staff, the next steps calls for this work to date to be brought forward to a statutory public meeting for input on the draft ROPA, along with input on all 6 options, the routing out areas, the triangle lands, hybrid lands, and even the potential for other hybrid options to be put forward by stakeholders. And the Planning Act requires that in that statutory public meeting that a draft ROPA must be available prior to the public meeting, and we've prepared one and attached it to the previous report. And staff continue to recommend that process unfold as planned, and that the draft ROPA that's been prepared proceed to the statutory public meeting. And we will consider all the information, including the results of the public process, the further technical work, and the information that's being brought forward today, the supplemental analysis, and at that time would make a recommendation to Council, and Council would have all the information in advance of deciding on a ROPA to actually be adopted. The process is unfolding on the basis of 6 themes and 18 criteria that were developed by the region's consultants in the form of questions covering the topics identified here: protection of natural heritage features and functions, coordinated, efficient, cost-effective infrastructure, fiscal responsibility, complete communities, agricultural lands, long-term urban structure. These themes incorporate the provincial policy, the Town of Caledon's work, regional policy, and the stakeholder input. And they were presented and brought forward in a staff report in May. And the themes also, it's important to note, do reflect a number of current term of council priorities, including increasing affordable housing, promoting age-friendly built environments, and planning and managing growth. So to get to the specific request of council around financial analysis of hybrid options, Peel staff have developed and prepared some mapping of hybrid options to facilitate that financial analysis. This map here shows hybrid option 3-4, which was prepared at council's request and includes lands in water pressure zone 6 and 7, and would include rounding out areas A and B, and that's consistent with the consistent with the recommendations from the region's consultant, the planning partnership, to include these areas, these rounding out areas, if proceeding with an option either 3 or 4 that included water pressure zone 7. The option 3 lands were not included in the draft ROPA, which emphasized the themes, the draft ROPA brought forward by staff, which emphasized the themes of urban structure implications and promoting fiscal responsibility. And that results in part from the planning partnership's recommendation that option 3 scored least in promoting fiscal responsibility because it requires relatively high investment in water and wastewater infrastructure for a new pressure zone and for the grade separation. And there was also associated with that infrastructure relatively high operating and maintenance costs, and Bruce is going to get into the specifics of that in his piece here. So the other hybrid option we were asked to bring forward financial information on is the option recommended by staff and for the purposes of the public meeting, and that's hybrid 4-5 shown on this slide. And the option 4-5 draft ROPA recommended by staff to be taken to the public meeting performs well against the criteria in all 6 themes. And it was also proposed because it eliminates the need to service water pressure zone 7, at least at this time, and it represents a balanced approach with particular emphasis on the 2 themes that were identified, the fiscal responsibility and promoting long-term urban structure. A hybrid 5-6 option has also been prepared by staff that's within water pressure zone 6 and protects for some future consideration of potential strategic employment lands. I should note that there was a question about connectivity on July 7th, and this map, you can see at the bottom there, does show the potential future extension of George Bolton Parkway, and this staff option would protect for employment lands on both sides of an extended George Bolton and along the future GTA West corridor. This version of option 5-6 was prepared at council's request, and the option area 5-6 was not included in the draft ROPA, which emphasized the 2 themes I noted. In part from the planning partnership's recommendations report, 5 and option 6, so both option 5 and option 6 scored least in responding to long-term urban structure implications because of land use compatibility issues and the potential for future protection, for at least consideration of future employment lands adjacent to the existing designated employment lands in Caledon and the future GTA West corridor. So finally, we've also included a financial evaluation of an alternative hybrid 5-6 option that was submitted by Solmar Development on July 12th. It extends further south than the staff prepared 5-6 option into the GTA West focused analysis area and to the northern portion of the Triangle lands. This second version reflects the request from Solmar. And from the Planning Partnership's report to the region, option 5 and 6, as I mentioned, scored least in terms of urban structure implications because of land use compatibility issues. The staff recommended hybrid 4-5 option, so going back, and the staff-prepared 5-6 option. Preserve the potential for strategic employment lands along the GTA West corridor, and the 5-6 option does encroach into the focused area. And there are two challenges that I wanted to note with the encroachment into the study area. First, there's a potential to interfere with the GTA West corridor EA itself, and the possible implications down the road should the province be acquiring land associated with implementing that EA. And the second issue that I wanted to note is that the potential that the EA itself could hold up development in the expansion lands for many years, given that process is unfolding and there's uncertainty around it. And the potential that could delay some DC revenue associated with the development of those lands if they're held up, and the risk associated with that. And Bruce is going to talk about the specifics of some of that. Should just note as well that these hybrid options that we've identified have only been developed by staff in the last few days in response to the request from council. So we've done the financial analysis that we're going to go through, but we haven't had the opportunity to run all of these hybrid options beyond the one that staff brought forward through all the different criteria and analysis and that. So just wanted to note that. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Adrian. I will now walk council through the following slides, which focus on the financial impacts of the various options being considered and the financial tools available for council's consideration when managing growth. When staff undertake a financial analysis of any type, the 9 principles of the region's long-term financial planning strategy are always top of mind. For this particular analysis, 5 of the principles are most applicable. These are respecting the tax and utility ratepayer, ensuring the capital plan is sustainable, user pay where appropriate, which in this context focuses on growth paying for growth, working with the local municipalities to support the economic viability of the community, and borrowing only for substantial long-term assets at affordable levels. Through the work of the Growth Management Committee since 2014, several financial tools associated with growth management have been identified. Discussions around 2 of these tools, area rating and front-end financing, were included in the fiscal impact analysis for the BREZ ROPA that was prepared by staff as part of the ROPA exercise. This document is available online at the region's website. Within that document on page 7 is a discussion of area rating. The following slides will reflect and expand upon the comments in that document. It should be noted that the existing DC bylaw that was adopted in 2015 did include costs related to infrastructure for BREZ. The DC eligible cost estimate of $82 million was based on the best estimates available at the time to service the area identified by the town of Caledon through its planning process for the Bolton expansion. The DC background study assumes this project will commence in 2026. Peel uses uniform region-wide DC rates for hard services, so these costs are already being collected as part of the current DC rates being applied across the entire region. These costs make up approximately 1.5% of the existing development charge rates. Changes to the Development Charges Act included in 2015's Bill 73 are now in effect and require that before a new DC bylaw is adopted, Council must give consideration to the use of area rating for development charges. The final decision whether or not to use area rating techniques for development charges still rests with Council. This requirement will be fully explored prior to the passing of the next DC bylaw and will be reviewed with the appropriate stakeholders. While full details of area rating will be explored as part of the next DC process, research done to date has recognized that area rating techniques for development charges have strengths and weaknesses. One of the primary perceived benefits of area rating for DCs is that it has the potential to encourage increased intensification, with potentially higher DC rates being charged in greenfield developments than in already built areas. Before such a rate system could be implemented, this potential rate differential would need to be confirmed through detailed engineering analysis on a regional scale. Some of the potential downsides of area rating include the facts that these techniques can also result in a reduction to the financial flexibility that is provided by the current method of pooling DC funds across the entire region, and that there would be increased administrative requirements for both the region and local municipalities under a new area-based system. It should be understood that the overall amount of DCs that can be collected will not increase as a result of using area rating techniques, but the overall DC burden will be redistributed, and some property developers will pay more and some will pay less. Area rating for development charges would not address any area-specific cost-revenue differentials associated with operating costs due to higher life cycle requirements. Area rating will also be considered in the context of supporting the implementation of the Preferred Growth Infrastructure Plan that is being developed as part of the work of the Growth Management Committee. Criteria will be developed for Council to use as part of giving consideration to the use of area rating techniques across the region prior to passing of the next DC bylaw. These criteria and the concept of using area rating to support the Preferred Growth Infrastructure Plan will be reviewed with the development community as well as the local municipalities through the Intermunicipal Growth Management Work Group that has recently been established by Council. To implement area rates, a new DC bylaw would be required that conforms with all the new requirements in the Development Charges Act enacted earlier this year. This work has already started but will not be completed until later in 2017. It is anticipated that the existing appeals to the region's 2015 DC bylaw should have been dealt with by the OMB by this time. Hearings are scheduled in this regard for the spring of 2017. The ultimate application of area rating techniques included in the next DC bylaw update process will give consideration to all areas in the region, not just the Bolton area being considered as part of the current ROPA. Another financial tool available to the region that was specifically mentioned in submissions from landowners included in the BREZ ROPA exercise was front-end financing. A discussion of this was also included in the fiscal impact analysis document produced and made available to the public as part of the ROPA process. The discussion on front-end financing was included on page 6 of that document. As mentioned in that document, the region does have an existing front-end financing policy dating back to 2003 that has been used by the region. The experience from past front-end financing, such as the BRAM East agreements, is that they are extremely complex to negotiate, administer, and monitor. The negotiation of the BRAM East agreements took place over a period of over 6 years. Final repayments of the funds associated with the works occurred 13 years after the first agreement was entered into. Negotiating with multiple landowners in a benefiting area can be challenging, and as a result, one of the features of the region's existing policy is that when multiple landowners are involved, a trustee must be appointed to negotiate on their behalf with the region. These agreements can be negotiated in many ways, but the general intent is that the developer's upfront costs associated with developing certain infrastructure and then are reimbursed at a later date by the municipality. The terms negotiated can vary, especially when it comes to repayment. The timing of the repayments can be tied to future development in the benefiting area. How much of the risk is transferred to the developer depends on several factors, including how administration, interest, and oversizing costs are allocated within the agreement. While these agreements can cover the initial capital cost of a development, they do not address the impact of the new infrastructure on ongoing operating costs and the eventual capital maintenance that will be required to maintain state of good repair. This is especially true if the infrastructure is developed out of sequence and is underutilized. Front-ending agreements can be applied to any of the options, so it is not necessarily a site-specific advantage to any one option area that is presently under consideration. Subsequent to the council meeting of July 7th, proponents of option 3 met with senior staff at the region to outline an alternative financing proposal for that area. The proposal had 3 main financial components. The first component related to front-ending costs related to water, wastewater, and an early payment agreement for road infrastructure required to service option area 3. The proposal was to upfront an amount of $69.1 million for water and wastewater and $12.7 million for roadworks. The front-ending agreements would not grant any credit for interest to the developers. The second component of the proposal would be that the cost for these works would be added to a new area-specific DC that would only apply to the benefiting area in option 3. Monies collected through this new DC would be the basis for reimbursement of the front-ending agreement amounts. The third component of the proposal would be the funding of the life cycle costs associated with Option Area 3. The developer has offered to fund the life cycle cost of the Zone 7 water projects for a period of 25 years from the in-service date or until complete build-out of the Option 3 lands, unless an area-specific user charge is implemented by the region. The developer also offered to fund the life cycle costs of the King Street grade separation for the period of time until GO Rail service is provided or the date when the region determines existing traffic demonstrates the need for the grade separation. Full details of exactly how this funding of life cycle costs would be accomplished have not been provided. After having had the opportunity to do a preliminary review of the Option Area 3 proposal, staff can give the following comments, but will advise that there has not been sufficient time to complete full due diligence. As mentioned previously, it should be noted that other proponents could also potentially bring forward alternative financing agreements, so entering into such agreements is not necessarily an advantage for Option 3. Development agreements such as those being proposed are very complex and will include many terms and negotiation points that can impact on the effectiveness of the agreement and mitigating risk from the region's perspective. Some of these items have been addressed in the documentation received to date, but others are still uncertain. These would include considerations around the impact of oversizing costs, exact repayment timing details, which entity would be responsible for administration costs, is there a trustee in place to negotiate on behalf of multiple landowners, and if the agreements are open-ended, if there would be a sunset clause. Another item to consider is that the Provincial Development Charges Act provides for an appeal process to the OMB for front-ending agreements. It states that any owner of land within the area defined in the front-ending agreement may object to the agreement and that the OMB will hold a hearing on the objection. So as a result, if there are any landowners outside of the proponent's landowner group that are eventually included in the potential benefiting area of the agreement, they could appeal the process to the OMB. The new infrastructure will also have ongoing costs for operations and state of good repair maintenance, and the proposal included funding of the life cycle cost. The proposals made in this regard are less clear than the capital cost proposals, and more detail would be required to bring clarity to exactly what is being proposed. The full life cycle costs, including an allowance for reserve contributions for eventual state of good repair capital work, could be quite substantial. Two key risks in regard of operating costs are, one, that the infrastructure put in place will be underutilized, and two, that proposals to mitigate this are subject to scrutiny due to the recent changes to the Development Charges Act, restricting the use of voluntary agreements. Another item noted in the proposal that can be highlighted is the concept of moving the costs associated with Bolton expansion infrastructure from the existing region-wide DC bylaw passed in 2015 to a new area-specific DC that would presumably only apply to Option Area 3. As mentioned previously, the existing DC bylaw includes estimates of $82 million in eligible costs with an expected project commencement date of 2026. Depending upon the timing of the potential front-end financing agreement, this could result in a brief period of time when these costs associated with the Bolton expansion would be collected from both the existing region-wide DC charges and the new potential area-specific DC bylaw. This could be considered double dipping. If an area-specific charge were to be implemented for these costs, they would then be removed from the region-wide bylaw the next time that the bylaw is updated. Any funds collected before then would still be included in the region-wide reserves that would be netted off of the next DC rate calculation, resulting in a slightly lower DC rates for developers outside of the BREZ benefiting area. While this can be seen as a reasonable approach, the existing DC bylaw is still under active appeal at the OMB with hearings scheduled for April and May of 2017. Depending on the timing of future potential agreements, one of the three appellants of the 2015 DC bylaw could theoretically make this potential double dipping an issue for the OMB to consider next spring. While this is a source of some risk to the region, it should be possible to manage the risk through the timing of future DC bylaw rate increases. Fiscal impact analysis in support of the current BREZ-ROPA exercise was conducted in-house. This fiscal impact analysis work examines the study areas defined in the overall process and assesses the financial impact of each on the region appeal. For purposes of this analysis, it is assumed that each of the option areas will have the same amount of residential and non-residential growth. The analysis also uses common assumptions for all option areas in regard to residential unit type distribution. Based on this assumption, there would be no material difference in the expected revenue generation for the option areas. It should be noted that for option area 6 and Solmar's hybrid 5-6, there is a risk to revenue generation due to the uncertainty with respect to the GTA West corridor. The calculation technique used to estimate the expenditures required for tax-supported services, such as police and housing, is also based on the expected increases in population and employment. Once again, based on these common assumptions, no material difference is expected in the cost to provide tax-supported services in the different option areas. The capital cost estimates reflect the incremental cost to service the option areas in Bolton and do not include the capital costs required for works located south of Mayfield Road, estimated at $86.2 million, which will be common for all option areas under consideration. DC funds collected in excess of the incremental cost requirements in any of the option areas would be available for the payment of system-wide infrastructure costs necessary to support growth in Peel. The main driver of material fiscal impact variances between the option areas are the costs required to provide capital infrastructure to each of the option areas and for ongoing operating costs associated with that infrastructure. There are significant differences in the capital infrastructure required to provide water and wastewater services to each of the option areas. This will impact the level of both capital and operating costs for each of those areas. Some option areas already have infrastructure in place that will allow for servicing without significant infrastructure being added. There would be differences in the capital cost requirements for the regional transportation services in each of the option areas, but they are not as material to decision-making as the water and wastewater capital infrastructure. Some option areas are located in water pressure zone 7, which would require relatively more capital infrastructure. With a population of approximately 10,000, additional Zone 7 infrastructure would be inefficient to operate. A larger population base would provide the necessary economies of scale. Developing in these areas would require a capital outlay that would add pressure to the region's debt requirements and result in more infrastructure being constructed and financed that might not be fully utilized for many years. The higher requirements for borrowing would increase the financial risk to the region of stranded debt. Stranded debt would potentially impact on future utility and tax rates. The incremental capital cost revenue differentials show the excess of development charge collections to the total incremental capital cost that is highlighted in green in each area. All option areas are expected to generate more incremental development charge revenue than incremental capital costs. Since development charge collections and costs are pooled across the region, a larger differential amount indicates that the option area will provide a larger net contribution towards systems costs associated with growth in the region. As noted earlier, the differential would also be required to cover the capital costs for works located south of Mayfield Road in the amount of $86.2 million. Options 1, 2, 3, and hybrid 3-4 have higher incremental capital costs due to the requirements of Pressure Zone 7. Higher life cycle costs reflect additional infrastructure to support Zone 7. Options 3, 4, and hybrid 3-4 require a grade separation. All of these costs will not be changed even by the application of the alternative financing tools. The tax-supported operating net revenue assumes that the property tax revenue generated in each area would be the same, since assessed values would not be anticipated to differ in any material amount amongst the option areas. No material difference is expected in the cost to provide tax-supported services in each of the option areas either, while maintaining existing service levels, so there is no relative financial advantage attributed to any of the option areas for tax-supported operations provided by the region of Peel. Life cycle capital costs that are highlighted in blue capture the expected capital state of good repair maintenance that will be required for the incremental infrastructure in each area. The analysis looks out 100 years and is based in 2016 dollars and is detailed in a later slide. It should be noted that the higher capital costs to put infrastructure in place do not necessarily result in higher life cycle costs due to the differing long-term maintenance requirements of different types of infrastructure. Subsequent to the July 7th council meeting, and as noted earlier by Adrian, Solmar has submitted a request to consider other alternatives. The costs of these two alternatives are included in this table, as well as the original option 6 and the Peel staff generated hybrid 5-6 option. The life cycle costs for the two newly proposed options are $9.47 million, which is slightly higher than the original option 6 cost of $9.23 million, as these options include a small life cycle cost of $240,000 for wastewater infrastructure not required in the original option considered. While the overall costs for all of these scenarios are very similar to the original option 6 assessed by staff, as noted earlier, there is a revenue risk attached to some of these options. This is the result of the outstanding decisions surrounding the GTA West corridor. Only the Peel hybrid option 5-6 completely avoids this revenue risk. Based on the percentage overlap with the GTA West focus study area and the total expected DC revenue of $170 million, the actual dollar amounts at risk for the other 3 areas are as follows. For the original option area, $76 million is at risk. For the revised option area 6 proposed by Solmar, $92.5 million is at risk. And for the Solmar proposed hybrid 5-6 option, the amount is $35.7 million. The next 2 slides include details of the total incremental capital costs and life cycle capital costs for all the options, including the Solmar options. I will not go through the full details of these amounts as part of this presentation, but fuller explanations are available in the technical documents. I will now turn it back to Adrian to complete the presentation.
So thank you, Bruce. So staff continue to recommend that a draft ROPA incorporating options 4 and 5 proceed to a statutory public meeting. And some of the key reasons for that. Option 4 was identified as appropriate and supportable by the region's consultants, the planning partnership. As I mentioned, it performs well against the criteria in all 6 themes, and the 4-5 hybrid option was recommended for the public meeting based on an emphasis placed by Peel staff on 2 themes in particular. That was theme 3, promoting fiscal responsibility, and theme 6, response to long-term urban structure. This hybrid option eliminates the need to service water pressure zone 7 at this time. And also, as I mentioned, it retains substantial flexibility for considering strategically important employment lands adjacent to the GTA West corridor. The next step for this work is to bring forward to a statutory public meeting for input on the draft PROPA, along with the draft PROPA that we've brought forward. All 6 options, the rounding out areas, the triangle lands, and likely hybrid options identified by others, and the hybrid options that have been identified to date, and the additional supplementary information that we've brought forward today. All of that would be brought forward to a statutory public meeting. And the Planning Act requires that a draft ROPA must be available to the public at a public meeting. Staff will consider all of the information, including the results of the public process and the supplemental information presented today, and the further work to be undertaken, and make final recommendations to Council planned for December. And at that time, Council will have the benefit of all the information from the entire process. We continue to recommend, and we've brought forward for convenience today, the resolution from the staff report from July 7th, and you will call that this reference, or this resolution references the draft ROPA, which was attached to that report, and as I discussed, that's the staff recommended one. And with that summary, I thank you very much for the opportunity for Bruce and I to present the supplemental information that you've requested, and for questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I've got a couple of questions. The one is I know I did talk to staff over a year ago on an area-specific development charge and how that would work out. And it's too bad it's come at so late that you say you don't have the actual numbers. Definitely, I heard your opinions why it can't work, but I know with Mayfield West, that was the only way we could make it work. And it was the developers that have done it. They had brought the industrial guys in under their umbrella, and it's working fine. The big problem is we've got a provincial highway corridor that the province froze us out, or we'd have a better success story to talk about it. So one is thank you for, I believe in my opinion, it's one-sided, but that's fine. Where I want to go on that is, you were saying for 10,000 for Zone 7, I get that. But Green Park subdivision, the North Hill's all part of the Zone 7, or the Zone 7 that's being taxed by Zone 6 at this point. So when we even not just about the subdivision, but we are bringing other areas that Zone 6 is supplying now in Bolton would put under the option 7, or I mean, the zone 7 water thing. Was that not considered? Because, you know, eventually it was always decided, you know, that we'll take it out of 6 for the time being with the pumps, but as time comes on, 6 will fall down where 6 needs to be, and 7 will come on when 7 happens. So that's the one concern I do have. 2 is, I'm going to, when this proposal came for Europa, it was option 3, was brought forward by the town of Caledon. We had a number of meetings, not just one. We had many that we talked to the public about on which option it had to be. We sent it even back with staff with the recommendation of the public to get more answers and more questions on which one to pick. So now we're going to go to the public with option 4 or 5. Fine. Why hasn't 3 been considered to show respect for my residents in Caledon? When we've worked with the public, we made a decision on where it was to be. It's like a slap in the face to Caledon. When you go to the public meeting, 4 or 5 is your justification, that's fine. But option 3 should be there because that was what was filed and submitted here at the region to consider.
Adrian, I can respond to one thing. Through you, Chair Dale, to Mayor Thompson. I don't want to get the wrong impression. We're not saying that we wouldn't proceed with DC area rating, but it's just something we want to give full consideration before the next bylaw. And we want to make sure we have proper consultations with all the affected stakeholders, including the intermunicipal work group and the development industry, before coming to a conclusion on that. And ultimately, it will be a decision of council. With regards to looking at only option area, one option area for the efficiencies and economies of scale, our focus in this particular task was just to look where the 10,300 were going. We haven't looked at all the scenarios that might involve further build out beyond that for what we're looking at here.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, I can respond to a couple of other of your comments. With respect to Zone 6 and Zone 7, certainly our understanding from the engineers in Public Works is that some of the lands that are currently developed in the north part of Caledon are within Zone 6 and have been able to be supported on the basis of modest improvements and adjustments and very skillful engineering by our Public Works staff. But they've also identified that with the growth that's contemplated in the locations identified through this work, that the significant infrastructure and the costs that Bruce has presented would apply to at that level, at that scale. So we're moving into that level. Your other question about the content of the public meeting and what would be brought forward, certainly as was done at the informal public meeting that we held in Caledon earlier this year, and as is spelled out in the resolution here, the intention would certainly be to bring forward, yes, the draft ROPA, but also the complete information that's been associated with this process. So including the application that's been submitted, the decision by Caledon, that information would be brought forward at a public meeting and be explained to folks, and would be an open and transparent, complete sharing of all the information that's been a part of that process. And as we have done through this process, not only through the formal statutory public meetings and the circulation, we have had the opportunity to have a pretty extensive project website that's put all the information on as well. So it certainly has been front and center, would continue to be the position of Caledon Council.
Well, I'd like to, later I'll bring a motion forward to say that to have at least 3 being discussed, because I think it's only fair to my residents of Caledon. 4 or 5 is your preferred, and I understand that, but I think going through the process, we're going to obviously we're going to the board. This is going to be a board decision, unfortunately. But I'm just saying, subject what comes out of the board, I think it's just only respectful to have 3 discussed there at the public meeting as well. I just think it's the right thing to do, personally. 2 is, I do have a map that I did get from the regional chair that hangs up from the region staff, where it shows option 6 and option 7 of our servicing, and it does. It takes in Green Park and the north end of Bolton, and that's why I'm just saying that would all tie in. So that's why I wanted to clarify that. Zones, not options. Sorry, thank you, Councillor Shaughnessy. What I'm saying is the zones. It's very site-specific. That's why even some of that little industrial core can't get servicing, is because it's in 7, even though it's been in the Bolton umbrella for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Madere.
Mr. Chairman, I know this is the delegations. Can I bring that motion forward now, or do I bring that up after we receive the delegation? What's the proper process?
Yeah, you can bring it now.
All right. Can we put it up? Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that. And I think where the main thing is therefore be resolved. I think that's what we're asking. And Councillor Innes will second it.
Actually, Patrick, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. There are a couple of aspects of the draft resolution that I think need to be factually corrected.
Okay.
The resolution 2015-821, which is referred to in the recital, the implication seems to be there that there hasn't been a public meeting where this option 3 application has been considered, and therefore that there hasn't been compliance with Council's direction. I think staff are of the view that the February 2016 public meeting where option 3, among other available options, was considered discharged that direction, and that it has been complied with.
But you see, it wasn't considered a public meeting. That's why I put that in there, but or we will have that in there. But if you want it, I can delete that line, because it really.
I think that makes an important point that needs to be clarified. We are today at a quite important juncture. I think that's obvious from the full attendance, both at council and in the audience. Today's decision is about what goes to the statutory public meeting. There are other types of public meeting where information can be conveyed to the public. And the February 2016 meeting was not the statutory public meeting. It was an information meeting for the purpose of informing the public. It has been referred to in the staff presentation that what is called for now is for a council decision on a draft ROPA to go to the statutory public meeting, which is the legally required process. And it is also the process envisioned as coming out of the facilitated settlement. I think it's potentially problematic to give a status to one of the proposals other than the one that council is directing to go to the public meeting. Under staff's recommendation, that would be the hybrid 4-5 proposal at the statutory public meeting. So I'm sorry, I may be confusing you here, but
Look, I'm not out to, Patrick, I'm not out, if that's going to be an issue, that's not a game changer for me. Take that line out, and I'm good with it. Are you satisfied with it, or if that's removed?
Well, that's
just a whereas, despite the resolution.
Well, no, the essence of the resolution is that the option 3 ROPA be brought forward to the statutory public meeting. And
well, that's what the motion is.
Really, council is essentially put at this juncture to giving direction on what draft ROPA is to go to the statutory public meeting. As staff have suggested, all of the options will be considered at the statutory public meeting. This is not the final decision that you're being asked to make today, but you are being asked to give direction as to what draft ROPA will go forward in order to meet our obligations to have a draft ROPA at the statutory public meeting. And that needs to be a clear draft ROPA and not one that is accompanied by a second draft ROPA. And that's the danger that I see here.
Mr. Chairman, I think what Patrick's saying is you can't have a draft regional plan amendment with two options in it. The regional plan amendment has to say, this is the option that's under consideration by council. Here are all the other options that were considered you can comment on. But you can't have an official plan amendment that has two distinct options. Is that correct, Patrick?
That's correct. And coming out of the statutory public meeting, council retains the discretion to make a decision other than the one that it went in with, but it needs to go in with a draft ROPA. The problem with this resolution that it's essentially saying go in with two draft ROPAs.
That's what we're asking for. The reason why is because the three came originally to this table. And I mean, it's a slap in my residents' face. You know, this is you know, you choose, but I'm just saying is I think it should at least go to a public meeting. There's no decision being made, but at least you're there to gather information. I just think out of fairness, why can't two go? So legally, you're telling me this can't happen? Is that what you're telling me? Or is it a preference?
Legally, I'm telling you that council needs to give direction as to a draft ROPA to go to the statutory public meeting, one. And two, although I understand the concern you expressed with respect to matters of respect and the complete application for option 3, coming out of the facilitated settlement as to how we would proceed was not the notion that the option 3 application would have some kind of special status.
Well, I'm not looking for special status. I think it's just out of fairness. That was asked. You know, it was changed by the region. Which is first time something like this has happened. But I'm just saying it's.
Are there any other speakers to this motion?
Yeah, there's one over there.
Councillor Ennis?
I have a question for staff. Has there ever been a point in time prior to this where, or even, you know, concurrent to this situation where there has been a position from one of the municipalities bringing forward a request for a ROPA as well as the region's position?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I know that there have been substantial ROPAs brought forward by area municipalities that that the region has taken great interest in, and has and that interest has resulted in significant changes and adjustments to the structure of the ROPAs, and that's played itself out in the development of the communities. The one that I'm familiar with is Northwest Brampton, where the region had some substantial concerns when that was originally brought forward with respect to transportation and shale protection, and as a result, the structure of that ROPA incorporated some significant policies that that protected those interests, including some phasing and that kind of thing. So certainly that that has happened, and I'm sure there are others as well.
So and maybe Mr. Prasad could comment on that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. I really have nothing to add other than what Adrian just said. The Northwest Brampton ROPA, which I was involved in, required significant discussions with the City of Brampton on areas such as transportation infrastructure, and also with respect to dealing with a shale aggregate resource on the property, and also with the development of the Mount Pleasant community into a complete community. The region had some policy aspects there that we put forward. It was eventually resolved. It was resolved at the Ontario Municipal Board through a settlement.
So it's not entirely uncommon to bring two draft ROPAs forward, or? I'm getting sorry, I'm confused, so I'm assuming that there's other people around this table that are confused as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there was one draft ROPA that was brought forward at the public meeting on on that. See, after the public meeting, the process is long. There's much more that happens after the public meeting. The council will make a decision. There's, in that instance, an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board by various parties, discussions with the OMB, settlement discussions. That entire process led to the OMB settlement, where the regional position on some of the issues were stood up to, and were implemented to the regional official plan.
So if we, I just want to understand the process a little bit better. So if we go with the staff recommendation forward to the public meeting, we host our public meeting, then we come back, staff gives their final recommendation, council makes their decision. If council's decision is differing than the recommendation, do we then have to hold another public meeting on that recommendation?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if council can make any decision it wishes to make. If one of the things that council has to consider in making that decision is what was appropriate information provided at the public meeting in making that decision, and in considering that, council may wish to say another public meeting should be held or additional information should be provided. There's many things council can do at that point in time, should they wish to make a decision that is that is contrary to staff's position, or even something that perhaps was not presented at the public meeting. So council can do that. This is what we're saying right now is the only thing we're doing right now is moving forward with a public meeting, but a draft ROPA must be presented at that public meeting. So a draft ROPA needs to move forward, not two draft ROPAs, one draft ROPA.
So under the Planning Act, we're not statutorily required to host a second public meeting should council's decision differ from the staff recommendation.
That's correct. It's not statutorily required. It's a call for council to make. Council can decide to hold an additional statutory public meeting if it decides that it's going in such a different direction that that's justified, but it doesn't have to do that.
Okay. Well, I thank Mayor Thompson for bringing this motion forward. I do understand why we're asking for this, and you've all heard me speak numerous times with regards to this matter. So I'm not going to drag it on, but I will say that it's the town that initiated this process. It's our application, which was deemed complete, which we had it peer reviewed as well as with the planning partnership with the region was a part of. It's our application that we've brought this forward and it's initiated this process, and I think that it's only fair that a draft ROPA include option 3, as it is the request of the town of Caledon and its residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Well, when it's deemed it's illegal, then we can't do anything illegal, so I'll withdraw it. But from the legal opinions that we received and recommendations, it could, but I have a great deal of respect for our solicitor here, and if that's what he says, I will withdraw, and I thank everybody for their diligence.
Thank you.
Listening.
I'll go back to the list then. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, staff, for all the due diligence and all the work. I appreciate how complex this was. I think certainly when we councillors come here, they look at regional work through the prism of what's best for the municipality. How does it impact them? And certainly, since day one, I always thought what is referred to as option 6 as the best option. Brampton staff, in their own briefing note, which I quote specifically, says that option 6 has the least financial impact on the city of Brampton and requires the lowest amount of initial capital investment. I'm in good consciousness, and I could never go back to my taxpayers and my residents and say that I supported options which would be detrimental and put more of a burden on Brampton taxpayers, especially when we're dealing with our own internal issues. So I'd like to move staff report at this point and just request an amendment on the second paragraph of the staff recommendation on the third line. So I would take out, not to the draft ROPA, I would take out, replace the with the a, and then I would ask after ROPA be added based on, draft ROPA based on option 6 and the triangle lands. Just before, so that would replace the 6 candidate expansion options, the 3. So again, it would be based on option 6 and the triangle lands. So I'd like to put forth, move the report with that amendment.
Patrick, I go back to you for clarification on that, if you understand the change.
It is open to council to make a choice, obviously, other than the one that staff are recommending. We couldn't alter the staff recommendation to refer to option 6 as opposed to option 4, 5, because that's not what staff are recommending. But a resolution could be adopted in the terms that Councillor Medeiros is proposing, if that's the will of council. The difficulty that poses, just so that you have all of the considerations on the table, is that, as has been pointed out, there's a considerable likelihood of this going to the Ontario Municipal Board ultimately, and you will then have a sort of a disjointed council decision as to what ought to go to the public meeting. Again, it's not your final decision. You need to put this in context, but there is a certain inconsistency in council simply receiving staff's recommendation and going off in a quite different direction that you will take into account as part of your decision making here.
Is there a seconder to that motion? I'll second it. Councillor Parrish. Okay. Do you have any other further
No,
comments?
that's fine.
Okay, then I'll go to my list if it's with respect to the motion that's before us. Councillor Yanika.
Thank you. I have a specific question of the deputants, if I may, not the motion itself. Speaking with regards to the analysis that you've done, and what I want to speak to in my specific question is the dangers of some of this long-term planning relative to the practical reality of the marketplace today. I want to give you some specific examples that I've lived through in 28 years. Years ago, and it was folks like you that did the studies for, I'm not saying it was your firm necessarily, some of it might have been for all I know. But I was around at the time when our staff came and said, we've got to do a long-range recreational plan. And what's the big thing going forward? Walking. Everybody's walking. Knees, joints don't walk. So start building golf courses. Build as many as you can. You'll never build enough golf courses. Well, I hope you enjoy the Canadian Open at Glen Abbey, because it's not going to be a golf course for much longer. And if you talk to your friends in the golf business, they said the business was an inch deep and a mile wide, but only an inch deep. During the same time that I was around in dealing with the same kind, we dealt with the Hershey Center in Mississauga. And we plopped down $35 million because we were told building it out in the middle of nowhere made sense. And everybody agreed except for one councillor. And he's talking right now. And since that white elephant was built, every councillor that made the decision, except for the one talking now, has said, we were wrong, you were right, should have built it in the downtown core. That thing about building stuff where people are again, but that's another discussion. We had probably the most important study done by folks like yourselves when Councillor Dale and I were much, much, much younger, and we were two newbies with the downtown core of the city of Mississauga, and we inherited a city center secondary plan in 1987 that says this is going to be the downtown. And shortly thereafter, well, it's not working, so we've got to do something else. And staff, like you, and an outside consultant came back and said, you're going to have 25 million square feet of office commercial space in your downtown core. And, you know, I'm not the brightest guy, so I don't know what 25 million, like, is that like a square one? No, that's retail commercial, and it's all flat. Well, what's square one? Well, it's 1 million square feet. I go, okay, well, I've got the Sussex Center. Talk to me in those terms, because I understand things linear. Well, that's 500,000 square feet. I go, well, 25 million. You're telling me we're going to build 50 Sussex Centers? Yeah, that's the plan, and it was the plan councillor endorsed. We didn't build a single square foot. And since then, the only office-type development that was built wasn't built by the marketplace. It was built by an institution, Sheridan College. If anybody is more powerful as a local politician that Hazel was in her reign, I don't know who that person is. And it's legion, the stories of how she tried to get us a convention center hotel. We ain't got one. But the best thinking at the time was, this is where we're going, 25 million square feet. The other one that comes to mind, I want to use practical examples. Councillor Raz will know it. I call it the AECL Center, Atomic Energy of Canada. It was in the 60s in the province of Ontario, right on a main corridor, the QEW. And it's the future. we're rezoning the future. The future never came because the damn thing doesn't work. To my question, and Councillor Medeiros, the practical reality is you have the cheapest service land down here in the south leading up from Brampton. Some people want mixed use and residential. In my world, we say build it and go ahead and keep moving along cheaply and deal with the practical realities you have today. Because if you're telling me, but hold on, the future and where's your employment land? I haven't seen an employment study. I keep saying it over and over again. Can somebody tell me what the nature of employment will be in the next 5 to 10 to 20 years? Because I don't know what it is. Can somebody tell me how you're going to box yourself in a corner if Caledon's bigger than Mississauga and Brampton combined? And if in the last ROPA you designated 400 acres in Caledon anyway for employment, I don't know what the nature of it will be. And under extraordinary circumstances, we thought that under an unprecedented debate here, we should stick a Canadian Tire in the heart of Bolton, except for one person again who voted against it. So against that backdrop, I want you to give me confidence and say, this is where we're going and this is the future, because I've been lied to many times in the past. And I conclude with a rhetorical question saying, I'm going to deal with the practical marketplace today and agree with Martin Medeiros, at least I can explain it from a financial point of view, that this is the most cost-effective solution going forward. And it doesn't close any doors. We got another 100 years coming and there'll be other twists and turns, because you can't guarantee me this is the future, because the others that tried before were wrong. Mr. Chairman, I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, because that bought us some time to put this motion together.
If nothing else.
Well said. I do one clarification though on your comments, Councillor Yannick, because I believe it was myself with your support on the Hershey Center being in the downtown core.
Absolutely correct.
Right.
For $8 million
But you
more.
stood alone on even voting against it where it was going, so I give you
Thank
credit
you.
for that.
And for $8 million, you agreed to move it into the court. Yes.
Correct. All right.
So it's up.
Okay, the motion's on the screen now. Just take a minute or two to review that. There is a list of speakers, but I want to ask, is there anyone on the list that wishes to speak to this motion? Well, they were on the board before with respect to the staff presentation.
We still have questions on the presentation.
Okay, well, we'll go through the list then. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things going back to staff's presentation. Last time, on July 7th, I talked about the issues and the challenges we're having in my community with respect to businesses and the economic viability of Bolton. I had a phone call yesterday. In your presentation, you're talking about more employment lands. So I'm just going to get to the point of more employment lands in Bolton, and that is what I spoke about on July the 7th. We don't need any more. Had a call yesterday or a couple days ago from a longtime resident who raised their children in our community. They have a business that they've been operating for over 30 years in that community. That business, the bank has now taken it over. This family is at risk. The parents are at risk of losing their home. The children are at risk of losing their homes as well. This is what we are dealing with in Bolton. Sure, we sit around here and we hear everybody putting forward their arguments about who's going to pay for what and all of that. But really, at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to. I've had several of my constituents, business owners that are not only business owners, residents in my community that are losing everything they have this is where we're at. We've been at this point for 10 years. We've been arguing this, and with no resolve. In the meantime, more doors are closing. I got a guy who puts up a fence. Small town or small business owners, these are not large business owners, small mom and pop. One man, he's an older man, invested over $100,000 in a plaza across the road. That plaza is falling down, goes and invests in the plaza across the street, a fence goes up, and he's ready to go under. Another lady, she's just gone under with a consignment store. She's done. I can go on and on and on. And I guess my point is, when you're talking about more employment lands in Bolton, and it was alluded to by one of my colleagues on July the 7th, this isn't what Bolton needs. The community has spoken clearly. It's not what they need. We're talking about warehouses and logistics and more of all the things that and I hate to be parochial, but this is what Bolton has been getting for years and years and years. The community is tired of logistics, they're tired of warehousing, they're tired of the one massive distribution centers, and who knows what else is coming, because my understanding in ROPA 28, there are applicants in there with more applications for massive warehousing and distribution centers. It isn't what Bolton needs. So, I have some real challenges, and that family who's ready to lose not just their business that they've worked for over 30 years, but they'll be on the streets. That is what they're risking, because their homes are mortgaged to keep their business afloat. They were planning on moving to Brampton, but they were asked by our former mayor and former economic development manager to stay in Bolton. They stayed. Now they're closing. Now the bank is taking over. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is, you spoke to the GTA West Corridor. Yes, there is a study area, but I will remind you, ROPA 29 moves ahead. In that community, there is a study area there as well, so I'm going to ask that you consider that also. We just talked about, we can't wait for the province to decide what they're going to do. In the meantime, my residents are suffering. Those folks who are making decisions at the top, I don't think they're in any financial, they're experiencing any financial sufferings or burdens. They're making these decisions, they don't get it. They don't deal with the phone calls that I deal with every day. The other point that you made is the utility and tax rates. I'm sure that that's going to be passed on to our residents. I think that that's what you said. Of course. We're paying it. There's a levy, I think. There's something in the water bill that was added. People are not happy about that. We have to pay. At the end of the day, there is one taxpayer. How much more can people be taxed? I encourage you to talk to those folks in Bolton who own these businesses, who are losing everything. So when we're talking about putting more employment lands there, I'm going to tell you, we don't need it. The folks who are living in Mayfield West, they are not coming to Bolton to support Bolton. They're actually supporting your community. They're going to Brampton and they're supporting Brampton. And all of our monies are leaving our community. We're sending our residents out to work in your areas, in Mississauga, in Toronto, wherever. Those are the communities that they're supporting, not our community. We don't have the jobs, but instead of bringing the warehousing in there, that is not going to be able to pay the salary and the wages people need to support a $700,000 mortgage, we need to bring in good employers. Employers that are going to employ our people so that they can live and work here in our community and support our community. That's what we need to do. That is not the region, and I'm not talking to the region, I'm talking about now the town of Caledon. That's what we need to do, and that's what economic development should be doing. We have a company that we've employed for years to do exactly that. I haven't seen it. I see more warehousing. The other thing that I'd like to remind you And I thank you for the review, because it's helped me understand, and it's actually helped me to go and do a little bit more homework, because I certainly did not participate in the process during the time that I was not in council, because I had my own life and my own worries and my own financial battles to deal with, and to make sure that I did have a roof over my son's head. So this person, I can certainly understand the feeling, what they are feeling now, the risk of their children being on the streets. I will remind you that I think in our own official plan, and I made a note, and I can't find it. Oh, here we go. The town's official plan on page 1-3, it speaks to the 3 growth nodes, Mayfield West, Bolton, and Caledon East. And it says the 3 nodes have full water and wastewater servicing. This has been the topic of discussion for years and years at this council table. For 10 years, this is what it's come down to: money. The governance issue that we're going through, it's about money. And this fits right into that. Money. That's what it is at the end of the day. Section 222 of our official plan, the strategic direction under subsection B, speaks to this pattern of growth will focus development in the south away from the moraine. That's our own official plan. And again, this process has allowed me to delve a little deeper, to do a little more research, and to participate a little more, and to get more information. So at the end of the day, my community, we don't need more warehousing. We don't need more logistics. We certainly don't need any more employment lands, because we can't fill up what we have. And I will tell you, it doesn't look very attractive for new investors. When things are closing, they're going to look at it and go, I'm not going to invest my money there, because I'm only going to go close my doors in a year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't know. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But I will tell you, I encourage all of you to talk to the folks, talk to those people who are operating their businesses in my community. The ones who are open are hanging on by a thread. Speak to the landlords. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Adrian and Bruce, for the presentation. I have a couple of questions for you. Adrian, the area 4 and 5, can you explain to council how the lines were drawn? For instance, area 5, it doesn't go all the way to the Gore Road. It kind of goes mid-concession, and then it goes to the north. Area 4 goes right up to Gore Road. Was there a reason why that was drawn that way?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, we did we carefully look at those issues. You'll recall that I mentioned in my presentation, and Council is aware, that one of the constraints of a process like this is places to grow, and the provincial policies that flow from that, and then the resulting policies in the region's official plan. So we're limited by the constraints of the allocations that the province provides at a regional level, and the density and intensification rates that we talked about earlier today. So all of those constraints result because this expansion to Bolton is really one of the last areas of implementing the 2031 allocations. We're constrained by the amount of population and employment allocated to the expansion, and the land area that goes with that in order to meet all those requirements. So that's why the land has to be so specific. So in looking at that, I mentioned earlier, we looked at the servicing issues, the boundaries of between Zone 6 and Zone 7. We looked at property ownership. We looked at environmental features. We looked at kind of potential implications on agricultural lands. We looked at the analysis that the planning partnership had done, and the background studies that were done as part of that. So that the health analysis and kind of the findings and the rankings that resulted from that. And based on all of that, we've come up with this geography, at least for the purposes, as I've said, for recommending for a statutory public meeting.
Well, thank you for that, but through the chair to you, Adrian, to me, when I look at Area 5, it would maybe be logical to extend that right to the Gore Road and then and bring down Area 4 a little bit further to the south in order to come up with the same amount of land that you would need. So it doesn't make sense to me that you have this jog where you have more developable land in Area 4 than you do in Area 5. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me why you did this jog in the plan here, in this proposal. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If you're trying to maintain the development further to the south as much as possible because of cost efficiency, why wouldn't you lower that and draw a straight line right to the Gore Road in Area 5? You have the map there, do you not?
Pump Station Road.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, certainly staff looked at more than just one, as I mentioned, more than just one criteria. We looked at all of the criteria, and although I mentioned that we put a special emphasis on long-term urban structure and on fiscal responsibility, we did look at all of the criteria and consider all of that in our recommendation to council. And so as a result of that, the implications in terms of healthy communities, transportation, complete communities, access to services, all these things were considered in what we brought forward.
Well, then, could you tell me then specifically why the area to the west of Area 5, Zone 5, that's now white, why that wasn't included and dropped down Area 4 and into a smaller area? Was there a specific reason why you did this jog?
So there would be a number of reasons. They would include things like connectivity to the existing residential community, access to services. They would include things like the potential for both road, pedestrian, multi-use transportation connections to the community. It would include looking at contiguousness with the existing community, and then all of that constrained by the land area and the density that's kind of we're tied to as a result of the growth plan and the resulting regional policy. All of that is why we came up with the boundary that we have. Right. The other, I guess, consideration that I mentioned earlier too is that the further south you get, and I should clarify, we're not, in this recommendation, we're only dealing with the process for the residential allocation for the expansion of Bolton. We're not dealing with employment lands. What we have said is that one of the considerations is the long-term urban structure, and so protecting, at least for the potential of employment lands around the extension of the GTA West and that. So that's...
Councillor Sprovier, I'm going to ask that Commissioner Lebrecht respond as well.
Yeah, certainly.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just to help, and I'll go back the last council meeting. I indicated, I think I said, you need to be kind to us as we try to fast track a few options. There are multiple options that you could end up with at the end of the day. The 6 options that are embedded in this process were the base options that were carried forward from the town's work. So we haven't recreated multiple options, but Councillor Sprovieri's comments are appropriate, and if that kind of feedback came through the public process, we could go back and, when you get on the ground and draw it, but we were working within the constraint of these are the 6 options we were playing with.
Okay, so I understand. Thank you. Now the question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Bruce. You indicated that when you did your financial analysis, even taking into account that the Area 3 landowners are willing to upfront all the infrastructure costs, like the water and sewer and road infrastructure. Even taking that into account, you indicated that Area 4 and 5 were still cheaper to service. Is that what you said to us during your presentation?
The comment was that the underlying costs will still be what they were. And I think the key thing to keep in consideration is one property owner has come forward with an offer for alternative financing techniques. And the point we're trying to make is that other property owners can make that same offer.
Well, and through the chair, and I think that's a very important part of this whole exercise in my mind. if the area 4 and 5 landowners are not willing to do that, let's say they're not assembled or they're still in the ownership of the farming community, from what I understand, and they say, well, we haven't, the development industry has not purchased our lands. So how can they make that determination at this point that they would be willing to upfront the costs? So I think that that's a very crucial point to keep in mind, that if Area 4 and 5 are now willing to upfront the cost, and the region appeal would have to spend the money to provide the servicing there, whereas Area 3, the landowners are prepared to upfront the cost at no cost to the region, then that we need to know what that difference is. So what will it cost if the region has to service 4 and 5? And what will be the cost? We know that there's no cost in servicing 3 because the landowners are going to pay for that. So, and if the 4 and 5 are now willing to upfront the cost, what is that cost? How many more millions will it cost the region appeal to provide the servicing 4 and 5? That is, to me, the most critical question in this whole exercise. And I believe that that information should be available to going forward to a public meeting to inform the public, if we go with Area 3, the developers are paying the costs. If we go with 4 and 5, the region will have to pay the cost, and it's going to be this many millions. So we need to know that information. I know you said that we don't know whether they're willing to or not, but we need to know that. I think that's the critical math here, to know whether who's willing to pay what, and how much is it going to cost the region at the end of the day.
Councillor Sprovey, I'm going to ask the CFO to respond.
Just if I can add some clarity to Bruce's response. In any of these 6 options, the costs are the costs. What the option 3 landowners have done is proposed to take the financing risk off the region's shoulders for this. Regardless, any of the proponents, all of the costs will be paid by any of the proponents of the development charges. So it's just the timing of when the financing would occur.
So, but again, I think that the main concern around this table has been that going to Area 3 will cost the region more. And going to 4 and 5, it's going to cost the region less. Now, if Area 3, the developers or the landowners are paying for that, whether it be short term or long term, the region doesn't have to invest any funding to provide service to Area 3 because it's going to be done by the landowner, whereas the region may have to invest a lot of millions to provide service into 4 and 5, regardless at the end of the day who's going to pay. But we're trying to, my understanding is that the region's already extended its debt substantially to, what is it now, a couple of billion, 3 billion?
1.3.
1.5?
1.3.
1.3. So my understanding is that we're trying to minimize the amount of debt, and if the region has to provide the servicing for 4 and 5, that means we're going to have to borrow more money to provide the service, and it's going to cost. We have to pay that back at some point in time. So to me, it's very important for me to know which area to support. If Area 3 are willing to pay the expenses today and it's no cost to the region, and Area 4 and 5 are not, and it's going to be a cost to the region for the next, they have to borrow, whether it be $150 million, $200 million to provide the services, to me, that's an important factor for me to make my decision as where I should be voting, which area I should be supporting. So I don't know how we're going to be able to get that information through this process. I would say that all the options should be open at the public meeting, provide the information to the public, and let the public comment on what they feel is the right way to go. And that's why we're having a public meeting, is to get the public input. But the public has to have all the information. And just going there and say, well, 3 is willing to pay the cost, but 4 and 5, we don't know if they're willing to pay. Well, doesn't give the public enough information to make.
Councillor Sprouvier, I think your point's been well taken. Do you have any other questions?
Well, I would say that we should go to the public meeting with all these options and let the public tell us which option they prefer. No, I think we can. I don't see any reason why we can't go to the public and say, you know, these are the options. Here's the information. Give us your input. Which option do you prefer? They could say 6, they could say 4 or 5, they could say 3.
They still can. We're not precluding.
Well, but, Mr. Chairman, if the staff is not going to pursue the idea of whether 4 and 5 are willing to upfront the cost, then we need to have that information. We have to go back to these landowners and say, are you willing to upfront the cost? So we can go to the public and have that information available to them. That, to me, is a logical step. Would you not say, Bruce? Bruce? The question is to you?
Yeah, they're certainly able to bring forward that information.
Good. Okay, great. And I hope that's included in information to the public. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy. Just before you do, is it the wish of council to break for lunch or to continue? All right, looks like everybody wants to keep going, or most people do. Okay, all in favor of lunch? Opposed? Looks like we're holding lunch. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, if there is any time for a Hail Mary, I think it's now. What disturbs me about this process is we were asked to not endorse any particular option. We were supposed to be just coming forward to go to a public meeting. And as somebody who has gone to the OMB defending the rights as a resident, I think their voice hasn't been heard in this. We're actually here as a council predetermining a decision when we go out to the public process. Is the public going to have faith in us? Are they going to believe that we are not being partisan on this? They need to have faith that we're going to make a well-rounded decision. I was going to support the regions 4-5 as a method to get to a public meeting. I don't think there's one person in this room believes that we're not going to the OMB. I'm sure every single person here knows we're going to the OMB, and I think everyone up there that filled the stands today says we're going to the OMB. But I would prefer that we allow the process, as regional staff have asked us to do, to allow the process to move forward. We are not planners. We are representing the people. We all have different interests when we're representing them. I think the previous decisions and information from council led staff, and it's only my opinion. We had Caledon for 3, we had Mississauga for 6, and they went smack in the middle at 4-5, but they say they can justify it. Allow staff to justify it at the OMB and allow the planners to justify their position at the OMB. It's going to happen. So playing games with, I'm sorry, I apologize, Councillor Medeiros, because I just said playing games. Changing this to 6, let's support staff, because I know if we don't support staff, we will have to get our own legal counsel, and we will have to get our own planners to support our decision here at the Region Appeal, which will cost the taxpayers more money. Do we want to do that? This has been long and drawn out. Let's get to the public meeting and see, let the cards fall where they fall. But I'd rather it be on the planners and the developer's ticket than the Region Appeals ticket as far as legal and planning costs. So there I am. I tried not to be passionate, but there I am again. But I will just say I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Well, I'm going to support the motion for pretty much the same reasons that Martin gave. I had our staff look at all the financials, and that's why we came back 2 weeks ago and said from our staff that the 3-4 option hadn't even been costed. So I'm happy to see it's now costed, and it looks not so bad. But the bottom line is our staff at Mississauga reminded us we pay 60% of the taxes up here, and we've got a lot of building going on with the LRT, and DCs are going to affect our people just as they affect the Brampton people. And I would like to point out that 70% of the commercial tax comes from Mississauga that comes in here, and 62% of the industrial, and my colleagues can plug their ears and hum. Of those numbers, more than half, 65% of both of those numbers come from Ward 5 that has the poorest population with an average salary income of $26,000 a year. So you can be sure I'm more concerned about costs than any other factor on this whole exercise. And when this is all over in December, I'm going to ask staff to come back with a full costing of all this has cost the region of Peel to go through this dance of spring for, it's been 10 years. I left, we were doing it. I came back, we're doing it. I want to ask a question on upfront costs, because this sounds like some kind of used car lot. We're saying the guys in Ward 3 are willing to pay the upfront costs and not charge us interest. Option 3, sorry. All that means is they're going to get their DC credits anyway. They carry the interest, and they pass it on to the people that buy the houses. Am I correct with that? Yes. Could you say it?
Yeah, the ultimate cost would make its way.
There's no free money here. There's no free developers walking in with $80 million and saying, you know what? We really know how much money we're going to make on this deal, so we're going to give you the $80 million, and we don't want the DC credits. Nobody has said that to us, have they? Anyone offered that?
No, the offer was for a front-ending agreement to pay for the cost of water and wastewater
I'm asking a
infrastructure.
rhetorical question. I just wanted you to say it out loud. I wanted Mr. Spovieri or Councillor Spovieri to understand this isn't somebody giving us free money. And I don't think any of them are going to give us free money. They may waive the interest, and they may upfront the money, and they're going to hit the people that buy those houses with that interest cost, because they're not in the business of providing affordable or social housing to the population of Caledon or anybody else. So I just wanted to make that one clear. This is, 6 forever is the most fiscally responsible. It makes use of existing infrastructure that's already been paid for. And to Annette's point, you can get people in those houses to spend money in Bolton. My parents lived on Healy Road, and they tried shopping in Bolton, and back then stores closed. So they were there 20 years. Poor Bolton has been in the dark ages. It's almost like Malton, which we're now moving into the 21st century by hook or by crook. So I'm supporting it because of my... Paleshi. the apple doesn't far fall from the tree. I'm supporting it because it is ready to build. It's got the infrastructure in place. It's the cheapest one on here. It's a slam dunk. And I'm really tired of going in little circles. And when you talk about aesthetics, that's a lovely thing to talk about. But when we were building Mississauga, nobody talked about aesthetics. They just jammed those houses in, jammed those roads in, had to catch up with the schools because they didn't have schools and parks. But it all worked itself out. We have parks, we have schools. Caledon will have parks and schools. Nobody's going to build a mess up there. So what you need to do is get the people in place as soon as possible to keep Annette's stores open and keep those businessmen selling stuff in those stores. And you have to keep it the cheapest you can, because my ward is paying half of everything that comes from Mississauga, 65% of it. And that is why I am seconding Martin's motion with as much passion as I can muster. Okay, Barb?
Yep. Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Well, I got to say, Councillor Shaughnessy's right. I'm going to be really quick. But I think there's some misnomers here, and I want to clarify it on record as the Mayor of Caledon. Our residents and all of us decided where's the best to build out our community because it is going to grow. The area that the staff has recommended where it's going to be employment is key, and we need employment. 80% of Callan's protected. In order to keep it sustainable, so we're not relying on everybody else to help pay the way, we need to double our employment base. I have 19 businesses, 12 of them that operate in Caledon, and none of them are warehousing or logistics that can't get land because there's no land available. We have spent time and time again, because it's either tied up by being frozen by the province or it's already been consumed. That 400 acres that we brought on is already pretty much consumed. This is the challenge that we've got. I do not have enough for my businesses to grow and expand. It's a real big problem. So the challenge is we need employment land, and employment land can go where the infrastructure is the cheapest. Residential is a cash flow. It passes through. Yes, the new homeowner, but that's part of business coming into an area. Residential can pay the freight. You can't front-end load employment land, and in employment land, we got to protect. So I thank staff for that. So I needed to clarify that and go on record, and that's the reason why I will not support option 6.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just thinking back of a comment that Patrick made earlier today about a disjointed council decision. I'm listening to the debate around the table and wondering how that is avoidable, because we have Caledon, who submitted a complete application back in September of 2014 on Area 3, or Option 3, and you have staff who are recommending a 4-5, and you have some councillors around the table who are favoring the Solmar for various and assorted reasons. So I don't know how you plan on bringing those three parties together, but it seems to me that we have an obligation to process the Town of Caledon application in fully and completely. And I hear you, Adrian, in terms of, other applications for regional official plan amendments. And you made reference to Northwest Brampton, but I guess my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that the hold in Northwest Brampton around the Heritage Heights is a provincial hold around the shale deposits, and that it won't be the Region Appeal that lifts that hold, it's the province. So we may have had some strong opinions on that part of the world, and we don't need to talk about that today because that's not what we're here to debate, but and you can clarify that for me later. But this is not a purely financial exercise. If that's what it was, the region would look quite different today than it does. And I can only assume that when Caledon submitted their application back in 2014, that they took a whole host of issues under consideration. They talked about sustainable communities, healthy communities, economic health of the town of Caledon. And so it wasn't just a one-dimensional application that was made. It was a complete application. And I'm sure that given the regional mandate around all of those other issues, that the term completed application covered all of those. So Caledon did their due diligence on that. I'm reminded of an impassioned speech that Councillor Anika did, and I don't know that I ever said thank you to you, back a number of years ago when Brampton was trying to bring all of its geography into the urban boundary, and your former mayor that you speak so highly of was opposed to that, and was quite forceful in her comments. And you spoke passionately about how Brampton should have the authority and the, I don't know what term do you use. I certainly can't put it as eloquently as you did, Councillor Anika, but you said Brampton should be in control of their own destiny, and that we are accountable to our taxpayers to make sure that we make those right decisions. And I think that we owe Caledon that same courtesy. Maybe, Mayor Thompson, you need to not be as polite this morning when you had an opportunity to talk about option 3. That's what we could be debating here instead of option 6. I'm not prepared to support this motion. It is not consistent with the staff report, and it's got 2 strikes against it. It's not consistent with the staff recommendation. It's not consistent with the completed application that Caledon submitted. Councillor Grove, you talk about your community up there and businesses closing. They need people. They need people. and they are traveling to Brampton to do their shopping and to Mississauga and Vaughan and other places because you don't have the people on the street to support the retailers that you have. And you've got a beautifully quaint downtown, and you're doing it an injustice by not fighting hard to get a statutory public meeting on Area 3. That is what the town of Caledon spoke. They spoke back in 2014. And when Councillor Miles and I moved a motion to have you move to an our fault, we said a public meeting on the Caledon application. We didn't say a statutory public meeting, and that's what we should have said. But that was my intent when I seconded Councillor Miles' motion on back in July. Was it this year?
No, it was on this.
Oh, 2015. It doesn't matter.
November 12th.
November 12th, we moved a motion to move the Caledon application to, we set a public meeting. Our intent, both of us, and Councillor Miles can speak for herself, was that it moved to a statutory public meeting. So, you know, it is time to stop the conversation, Councillor Groves, and move on with this. And so I'm not going to support this. This is completely contrary to, as I said, two decisions. We need to move this forward and bring it to an end, and we will probably forever be a disjointed council on this, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Downey.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Moore, and I will not be supporting this either. And I thank Councillor Groves for framing and making my next point. No one in my ward shops in my ward. No one. They shop in Brampton, just like I do. So supporting option 6 and placing 10,000 more people on the border of Mayfield Road will do just that. It will not bring people into the Bolton core. It will bring them to Brampton. Option 3 puts the population in the central area of Bolton. I grew up there. I've lived there longer than you have. I'm sorry, but I put my rank here. There are businesses that are closing, but that has to do with the types of businesses that are being counseled to open. There are businesses that have been there as long as my parents lived there, since 1971. You know, this is a disappointing place to be. I support Councillor Shaughnessy and all of the points that she made. We need to move on. Our public deserve a statutory meeting, and I think that we're doing them a disservice. We're doing our municipality a disservice by pointing out that, we do need population. We need more population, and it needs to be planned, and it needs to be put in a place that's going to support our businesses and our municipality, not in a place that's going to support our neighbors. There are lots of great synergies to be had along the border. Lots of people in my ward, we cross over, we use different sports clubs, recreation, all of that. It's fantastic. We're your green space. I get it. But the population in Bolton does not need to be at the south end where nobody then comes into the town. That's not supporting Bolton.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, if option 6 were to move forward, we're talking about servicing. I guess the natural course then it would follow, would service all of option 5 and 4, because when I look at your map, 4, 5, and 6 are in zone 6. So is that how it would work in terms of servicing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, probably the engineering staff can reply more fulsomely, but my understanding is that as you move further north, there's incrementally more infrastructure that's required, and that when you hit the Zone 7 water pressure zone, the incremental is a big jump because of the substantial infrastructure. But even if you move from option 6 to option 5, there is a difference in the infrastructure that's required as you move further north.
Okay.
But you see the numbers in the presentation. You know, there's not that big jump until you hit the next water pressure zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. With all due respect to Councillor Downey, I will remind you, when we were debating this issue in Caledon many years ago, we hired a consultant by the name of Scott Morgan. The town hired this consultant to do exactly what I just talked about. Where do people shop? When we were debating Mayfield West, Scott Morgan indicated in his report, and you can go back and review it, that people won't travel east-west, so they will not come from Mayfield West and travel east to Bolton. They will go north-south. All of these 6 options will support the Bolton community because they're all within a kilometer, 2 kilometers, whatever it is. So the debate is not really about whether one option over the other is going to support the Bolton community. I can tell you that the folks who are operating business there, they really don't care where you choose because all 6 options will support the community. And that is why when we developed the South Albion Bolton plan, we identified all of those 6 areas as future residential growth options because they're all within close proximity to the Bolton community. The Places to Grow talks about hubs and supporting hubs. Bolton is the hub. We created that hub. We need to feed it. Mayor McCallion once used an analogy, and she said, Ontario is the heart of this country. All the cities and municipalities around are those arteries that feed that heart, and it keeps it pumping, and it keeps it alive. Ontario is the economic engine of this country. Bolton, we created Bolton. It is the hub. It is the heart of Caledon. All the other areas around it are those arteries that needs to feed the heart. It needs to pump blood through to the heart so that the engine and that heart can keep beating and staying alive. We've been slowly clogging those arteries because we've been sitting here for 10 years debating this issue. And again, it doesn't go back to what option is going to feed the Bolton community. The downtown core, Councillor Moore, it's dead. It is a ghost town down there. Council came up with this brilliant idea. Let's turn it into a heritage conservation district. Well, that's not going to help anything either. It needs people. The entire hub, the industry, the retail needs people. This isn't a debate that we had many years ago, whether or not we're bringing people. This is a debate now, where are we putting those people? We are bringing those people. The region has determined that through ROPA 24, that there are 10,000 people coming. Where are we putting those 10,000 people? That's the debate. And it doesn't matter where you put them, whether you put them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, they will support the existing Bolton community. I will also tell you that many years ago, a former member of our council, who's passed away, when we were doing this debate, we were talking about the water tower, and we were talking about all of those things, and whether or not all of those things were meant to support growth in option 7. Staff at the time clearly said, no, that wasn't the intent of the water tower and anything else that we're doing. It was not the intent to support anything in Zone 7. You know, we can sit here, debate, and I agree with Councillor Shaughnessy, we are going to the board. But at the end of the day, developers, they've got all the money. They live their lives, they do what they do, they move on to another community, they move on to another municipality, and they develop. The people, they don't have any money. They go bankrupt. They go broke. They are put out of their homes.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I, of course, want to speak on behalf of the taxpayers of Mississauga, and I want to do what's fiscally responsible and in their best interests. And I hear from Martin Medeiros that what I'm about to say is in Brampton's best interest too, because I think you've done the same cost analysis. So it is the responsibility of this council. We are the ones who are tasked with choosing where the development's going to go, where the 10,000 people are going to go. And we have 6 options in front of us and another 3 or 4 hybrids, and it is our ability to pick one. And so I took a really keen interest in looking at all of them. I've done a lot of due diligence. I've read over everything numerous times to understand it all. 1 and 2, of course, don't make sense. And I just want to address 3 as well, because of course I know that it's near and dear to the heart of Councillor Innes and Mayor Thompson. But it wasn't considered because it didn't make sense. And that's why we have the problem, and that's why we're here today fighting over it. And the reasons I saw were that, first of all, it's the least cost-effective option of the ones we're considering. I mean, the revenue, the revenue is the revenue no matter which option we pick. You've got 10,000 residents, which equal about 2,400, 2,500 new homes. DCs are what, $75,000, $80,000. That's where you get your revenue. We know that the cost of the pipes, the servicing, will be about $100 million, so you're netting $70 million. Then you've got to build a water tower. So now you're netting $40 million. So when you look at some of the options that are further south where the pipes are, we get to put all that in the bank. It's all revenue, DC revenue in the bank. So that's the first reason. It's the most costly. It's not contiguous, as we know. There was a hypothetical GO train station, which we know is not a reality, because I asked Bruce McQuaig directly what the timing of said GO train station in Bolton would be. And he said it's not on the horizon, not short-term, not medium-term, not long-term. We have our defined projects. It does not exist. And I read the lawyer's letter last night, and again, it references a GO train station. There is no GO train station there, according to Metrolinx. I asked Bruce McQuaig. I have a letter from Bruce McQuaig. It says, not on the horizon. We got a lot of other projects ahead of it. Then there's something about Caledon propane and concrete batching plant. There is a propane plant that we would put adjacent to this residential area. Coming off an explosion a few weeks ago in Mississauga, I think that is a serious concern we should have, that such propane plant would exist in near a residential area. Of course, the additional infrastructure that it would require, the water tower and wastewater, that's additional cost, and that's why I referenced that $70 million being brought down to $30 or $40 million for us. It's not shovel-ready, but what I mean by that is I understand that people who are the development group don't actually take ownership of that land for a few years to come. So it's not shovel-ready. So if we allocate it now, they couldn't even build for a number of years. Finally, Caledon's own official plan directs growth away from the Oak Ridges Moraine, and that's option 3. No, it's not. Yes, it is. It abuts it. It abuts it, so we shouldn't have the development abutting the Oak Ridges Moraine. Now, finally, on the area-specific DCs, we've already been over this with the staff. They don't make growth affordable. They pass the buck to the homeowners and the businesses. It inflates the cost of that development to those new homeowners and businesses. They're not as flexible. We can't add that revenue where we want it. And those are the reasons that I couldn't support an option 3, not today, not in the future, not ever. And then we looked at 4 and 5. Of course, that's the staff recommendation. It's the safe recommendation. I hear you. It's the safe recommendation because we got all kinds of camps everywhere choosing different sides. So 4 and 5 was the safe place for the staff to land. I understand that. It does add more cost than some of the more southern options. And also, I understand that there is numerous landowners, not a single landowner, not a single developer. And in that way, that would be very difficult to coordinate to build. So that's an added complication that it would be very difficult. And so that brought us to 6. We know that it's the most cost-effective. I'm very cognizant of our debt level at $1.3 billion here. So if we have an opportunity to put $156 million in the bank, because our net revenue from any development will be $170 million, less the costs, and the costs are estimated at, what, 16 million. So we put 154 million into the bank. Life cycle costs were also less at 9 million. It makes the most sense. It's also not only cost-effective, contiguous growth, and it's shovel-ready. Unlike some of the other projects, this one is ready to go. And yes, it abuts vacant employment lands, which have been approved. Annette, Councillor Groves referenced the GTA West Corridor, and I know staff are sensitive about this. And sure, you have a right to be, because the proposed corridor is going through there. But it didn't seem to be an issue in Mayfield West, right? We had corridor-specific policies with that ROPA 29, so we would do the same here. That makes sense. That makes sense. So for these reasons, I came to my own conclusion and said, we're responsible to our taxpayers in Mississauga and in Brampton. I don't think there's any other option to select but 6. I agree with Councillor Medeiros. I agree with Councillor Parrish. It's shovel-ready, it's contiguous. We put more money in the bank. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do, and that's why I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've been sitting here today wanting to jump into the conversation, but I've been trying to make sense out of the conversation, and I finally concluded I can't make any sense out of this conversation or this process that we're in the middle of, because it doesn't make any sense, quite frankly. I've listened to all of you respectfully with your opinions, when in fact I hear you saying things that totally fly in the face of everything that we do here at the Region of Peel and at the area municipalities when we look at our planning our communities. It's just, everything is flying in the face of what we as a region are trying to do as far as, and at the municipal level, as planning healthy communities. Now, I got to look at the process, because again, I'm trying to make sense of a process that started way back 2014. Caledon filed all of the papers that they were supposed to file here at the Region of Peel, and during our last big discussion on this, we ascertained through all of the questions through staff that they did everything that they were required to do through the Planning Act. So came to the Region of Peel, and there was delegations and a lot of different information, and probably over a year later, the Region of Peel says, well, we as a Region of Peel, we are required to go through a process where we will do our own due diligence, and we will evaluate those 6 options, correct? So we start a process. Council says, okay. We start the process. We hire the planning partners to help us on the process. Council agrees to this. So the planning partners are hired. They develop the criteria. The criteria is adopted by council. And they go through the whole process, doing the evaluation, 6 different criteria. We say, yeah, those are good. At the end of the day, the planning partnership says to us at the Region of Peel, overall expansion options 3 and 4 are the most preferred through this evaluation. Options 1, 5, and 6 all score some, but they have very different attributes and issues. So then the staff, they are asked at the last meeting, okay, go away and evaluate this and evaluate that and evaluate this and that together and that and this and this and that together. And come back to a council meeting in a few weeks and tell us what is the best preferred financial option. Well, staff have said to us, well, this is what we've been able to come up with, but really. And then in the middle of this, the owners from option three, they jump in and they say, hey, we have the best deal for you because we're going to upfront everything, including life cycle costs, that's pretty darn good. We don't usually get that offer from anybody else. And the staff says, well, that's irrelevant because, in fact, we can ask all of the property owners if they would do that, so the impact of that really is irrelevant to anything at all.
We want them to be innovative.
And then, at the end of the day, we have staff recommending 4 and 5 because in their evaluation, 4 4 and 5 can hook up to existing infrastructure and is probably not going to cost as much. And then Councillor Madeira says, well, I don't think we should regard any of that. We should actually,
That's not what I said.
well, sorry, okay.
I regarded all the
Okay,
criteria.
sorry. And then Councillor
And I think our
Medeiros.
staff said very clearly
Okay,
where financially
let me
we should
finish.
be.
So Councillor Medeiros puts a motion on the floor for option 6, which was probably the least favorite option, went through Caledon's evaluation and through the planning partners' evaluation. The only thing that option 6 is the most economical. When did any of us in the city of Mississauga or the town of Caledon or the city of Brampton for that fact ever plan their communities based on cost alone? It's a factor, yes, absolutely a factor. But in the evaluation process that we've went through, the areas that score the highest when we're looking at planned, healthy communities, which, by the way, is what we do here at the Region of Peel, and we spend an awful lot of time developing policies and having working groups and talking to the community and requiring the developers to do certain things, is to develop communities. What about economic development? Totally disregarded in this. Infrastructure, disregarded in this. So now we have a motion on the floor, and when you look at all of the options, we have a recommendation for option 6, which its only attribute, as far as I can see, because I'm just trying to make sense of a process that doesn't make any sense to me, is that it's cost efficient. When it came to compact, complete, and healthy communities, scored least. Agricultural lands, some. Urban structure implications, scored least. Natural heritage and associated functions, some. And yet, the options that the planning partners, which we agreed to, and all of the criteria that was developed, option 3 and 4 were the highest. And then if you add into the scenario the fact that the option 3 landowners have agreed that they're going to cover all of the costs, including life cycle costs, I would take option 3 score and I would change theme 1 is most, theme 2 is most, theme 3 is most, theme 4 is most, theme 5 is some, and theme 6 is most. Obviously stands high above all of the other options when it comes to all of the things that Caledon needs to do in their community. And that's to develop their urban core, intensify the community, develop opportunities for economic development. And into all of that, the policies that we have adopted as a region that says, let's look at some strategic ways of financing our development charges, because as we all know, DCs come in after the fact, not before the fact. This is a positive thing. Sure, the others can do it as well. But to throw all of the work that has gone on from 2014 through the Town of Caledon's process and through the Region of Peel's process, to throw it out because at the end of the day, for some reason, unbeknown to me, option 6 keeps springing out of the woodwork and getting on the floor when through all of the evaluation processes, it's at the bottom. It's the least preferred option by the consultants and also by the process for the Town of Caledon. So no, I do not support option 6, and I have no idea where this is going to go today, but this is the most unorthodox process that I have ever seen in 28 years in government.
Just making it up as we go along.
Yeah, make it up as we go along, and to heck with.
Councillor Sato.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I'm kind of smiling as I listen to all of the conversation going on. planning is very interesting because when it suits you, you have to listen to the staff recommendation. And then if it doesn't suit you, if it doesn't meet your goals, then staff recommendation gets thrown out and you come up with a whole new one that wasn't even on the table. So it's rather remarkable how planning is done. But, you know, I will not be supporting the recommendation that's in front of us, and I will be supporting, in this case, the staff recommendation. Staff were asked to go away and get the costing. The costing between 4.5 and 5.6 is not huge. I mean, when you look at the numbers, and even after looking at that costing, the financial impact, staff are still recommending 4.5. And it makes sense from a lot of the reasons that have been talked about around the table. I would not be supporting the 3.4 option because of there is a huge cost difference there, regardless of the fact that of what the developer has brought forward. You know, I think staff have probably done more work on this, reviewing all of the options, both planning staff and finance staff and work staff, than I have seen done on any application and any ROPA over the last 25 years at the Region of Peel. I don't think we spent as much time on developing the regional official plan when we brought the first official plan in as we have on this particular amount of land in Caledon. So I'm hoping today that we can move forward, follow the staff recommendation, take 4 and 5 to the public meeting, and, you know, we're going to end up at the OMB no matter what happens. And I've heard it said many times that you're better to end up at the OMB supporting the staff recommendation than not supporting the staff recommendation, because you want your staff to be there to speak on behalf of what council is endorsing, rather than having to bring in outside staff and increasing your costs. So, you know, you can't have it both ways. You either follow the staff or you don't follow the staff. And in this case, I think we've done all of the research. We've, you know, looked at it in and out, and this cannot be a political decision. This has to be based on the facts, based on good planning, and based on the impact of what's going to happen to the community that's surrounding these lands and the people that are going to live here in the future. And while I know it's not exactly what the mayor wants, I think it's closer to what Caledon is asking for, and without having a huge financial impact overall on the Region of Peel, I think it's the best option.
Thank you. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too have kept quiet during this whole process, and
That's
I
not
think
true.
I haven't.
No, you've been yattering about it.
Oh, okay. I've been chewing in the background. No, that's not correct. I'm not two. You know, it's from my residents, it's fiscal responsibility, and that's how I look at this, and you want to, you know, so there's some other councillors that want to muddy the waters a little bit and show you this and not talk about the main points, and we talk about good planning and proper planning. I think the first line item on proper planning is you plan from the south where the services are. It's kind of right there at the top. So you want to take a step further and look beyond that? Okay. You look at option 6 and you know, I'll be supporting this motion, and the fact that option 6 has the employment opportunities in there. They have the opportunities for a work-live community, a full community close to Bolton, close to the highway, the transportation. The services are there. I don't know what else. I understand you want that option 6 up there, and you had a application that was deemed complete, and you brought that forward to the region. I don't know if option 6 or any of the other options were provided that opportunity. I don't think that they ever went to a public process. I think they may have been deemed complete applications, but never actually saw the light of day. So, option 3, I understand that's the one that you've all rallied behind, and I support you rallying behind options. I just, from my point of view, and I can't with good conscience say to my taxpayers that you're going to have to pay for the services of the north end of Bolton, even though it's not going to be right away. It'll be down the line, and you have to pay for it then, or the lack of payments there, be it by DC credits. So I see I'm the last one, and I'll finish it off with that and the fact that it's fiscally responsible.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other speakers, the motion has been moved, the motion taken as read, and the motion was moved by Councillor Medeiros, seconded by Councillor Parrish, and a recorded vote was asked for by Mayor Thompson. So I'd ask the clerk.
All those in favor of the motion before you, please rise. Councillor Carlson, Mayor Crombie, Councillor Fonseca, Councillor Groves, Councillor Ionica, Councillor Kovac, Councillor Mahoney, Councillor McFadden, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Parrish, Councillor Starr. All those opposed, please rise. Councillor Downey, Councillor Innes, Councillor Miles, Councillor Moore, Councillor Raz, Councillor Sato, Councillor Shaughnessy, Councillor Sprovieri, and Mayor Thompson. Carries.
The motion carries. Okay, moving on. There's no notices of motion in camera. Bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council. Moved by Councillor Paleshi, seconded by Councillor Fonseca, that bylaw 43-2016 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its special meeting held on July 21st, 2016, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws relating thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the Regional Chair and the Regional Clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Mahoney, seconded by Councillor Sprovieri. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
When I see a cruiser parked on the side of the road, I immediately think of my mom, and that's always difficult.
OPP members stop vehicles on highways across Ontario every day, yet drivers passing emergency vehicles often don't move over or slow down.
It's just so simple. Slow down and move over, and she would have been here.
is City Matters, your weekly update of city news and events. The annual Brampton Farmers Market has returned for the 2016 season. Residents are invited to head downtown on Saturdays until October 8th and to Mount Pleasant Village on Thursdays from June 23rd to October 6th for fresh-packed seasonal vegetables, a large selection of organic produce, meats, cheeses, eggs, baked goods, and more. July 16th to 24th is Water Safety Week at the City of Brampton. Visit Professors Lake Recreation Center from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. each day for demonstration and information sessions. Participation in activities and workshops are free and with the purchase of regular admission to the beach. For admission pricing and more information about Water Safety Week activities, please visit brampton.ca.
Join us here on Rogers TV for 12-week series Creating Your Best Life Now. Get ready to learn tools and tips that are necessary for you to create your best life. Once you learn strategies of my 12 guests, you will be equipped for success and results that last. Over 12 weeks, you will be built up with the confidence to overcome obstacles and conquer your fears and finally live a life that you love.
This is Rogers TV, Brampton. The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hey guys, you're watching City Sparks with me, your host, Hilma. We've got a great show lined up for you, full of fashion, films, and a whole lot of fun. Coming up, beauty blogger Saman Munir. From IMFDF, Fatima Beg. Actor Saad Siddiqui. Actor Craig Sear. And my first guest, writer, director, and filmmaker Maninder Channa. Hey guys, welcome to City Sparks. I'm here with my first guest, a filmmaker, writer, director, jack of all trades, man who does everything, Maninder Channa. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Ms. Khan.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, you are working on some big things. We've got a movie coming up that you're going to talk to us about in the second segment, but let's start off talking about how did you get into filmmaking?
How did I get into filmmaking? Very slowly. It was a very strange process. I started out in journalism, actually.
Oh,
so
okay.
I did a lot of TV stuff. I actually did stuff at Rogers at the beginning, too.
That's right. You had told me that before.
I know. I won like a Reporter of the Year award. When
Really?
I was getting awards, yeah. So I moved into TV, and I had a comedy troupe for a